Imagine yourself on the Giza Plateau. The fierce Egyptian sun pounds against the weathered limestone. Looming behind you is the immense Great Pyramid, defying comprehension. Yet your gaze isn't fixed on it. Instead, it draws to something far more ancient, vastly more ancient. There lies the Great Sphinx of Giza, its lion's form topped by a human head, hewn straight from the bedrock. Standing 66 feet high and stretching 240 feet in length, it gazes eastward at the sunrise, its eyes having witnessed countless dawns beyond verifiable record. What escapes most observers is this. The Sphinx rests within a vast enclosure, a deep gouge excavated into the plateau. Those enclosure walls, forming the Sphinx's very flanks, reveal a narrative that conventional archaeology has labored for decades to dismiss. For etched into the limestone are features that defy expectation: profound vertical fissures, rippling horizontal striations, undulating motifs resembling anything but windscour or sand abrasion. These resemble the marks of water erosion, abundant water, rain cascading from the heavens in deluges, persisting through centuries upon centuries, eons upon eons. Precipitation of such magnitude that Egypt hasn't experienced in at least 5,000 years, likely far longer. Tonight's exploration begins with this eroded stone relic amid the Egyptian sands. Yet it propels us to the close of the last ice age, an era when the planet transformed utterly. Enormous glaciers blanketed half the northern hemisphere, oceans lapped 400 feet below current levels, and the Sahara bloomed as a lush grassland threaded by waterways and punctuated by ponds. We'll delve into the proof, from geology, archaeology, and myths, that hints at human societies predating our textbooks' timelines. That the Sphinx may have endured the colossal floods concluding the Ice Age, that it could stand as a relic from survivors of the catastrophe that upended humanity 12,000 years past, and we'll approach it candidly, acknowledging certainties, uncertainties, robust data, and ongoing disputes. This isn't about faith or skepticism. It's about scrutinizing the clues and posing sharper inquiries. We begin with the consensus, or what passed for it until lately. Mainstream Egyptology dates the Great Sphinx of Giza to the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom, circa 2500 BCE. It was ordered by Pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid rises immediately behind it. Despite erosion, the Sphinx's visage is thought to depict Khafre personally, as a symbol of the ruler fused with godly vigilance, melding human wisdom and leonine might. It safeguards Giza's hallowed burial grounds. This chronology draws on key supports, primarily parallels in style with other 4th dynasty works. Next, its nearness to Khafre's pyramid and processional path. Then, a stele erected between the Sphinx's paws by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BCE, bearing an inscription some scholars interpret as alluding to Khafre. Finally, the straightforward reasoning that Old Kingdom Egyptians possessed the skills, structure, and drive to craft it. Throughout much of the 20th century, this timeline faced little opposition. The Sphinx aligned chronologically with the Great Pyramid, both hallmarks of Egypt's pyramid-building zenith, embodying pharaonic might and celestial rule. End of discussion. But the discussion persisted as annual winds strip sand from the enclosure and periodic studies deploy advanced methods to probe the structure. Researchers began spotting anomalies that clashed with the established account, indications of a far more enigmatic, far more ancient past. The figure igniting today's debate wasn't an Egyptologist. He was a geologist. Robert Schoch, a Boston University professor, arrived in Egypt in 1990 at the invitation of author John Anthony West. For years, West had contended the Sphinx predated the pyramids, citing the erosion signatures on its surface. Lacking scientific expertise himself, West sought a geologist's rigorous assessment. Schoch approached warily. He anticipated a swift refutation of West's ideas, allowing a return to his routine studies of rock features. But when Schoch stood there in that excavation pit, scrutinizing those enclosing walls and analyzing the erosion marks through the lens of his expert geological perspective, everything changed for him. What caught his attention wasn't the typical signs of wind-driven wear. Instead, it appeared to be the result of water from rain causing the damage. The Sphinx, along with its surrounding enclosure, seemed to bear the scars of heavy downpours over many millennia. Let me make this crystal clear about Schoch's position. He wasn't attempting to pin down a precise construction date for the Sphinx, nor was he speculating on its builders or their motivations. His point was a focused, strictly geological one. The erosion visible on the Sphinx and its enclosure walls aligns with extended contact from significant precipitation rather than the dry environment that's dominated Egypt for the last 5,000 years. Assuming that holds true, and granting that the Sphinx has remained in place since its creation, this iconic structure has to date back much further than 2,500 BCE. Just how far? That hinges on the era when Egypt's weather could generate such erosion. And that's where things turn fascinating, since we have solid knowledge from climate research, examinations of old lake deposits, pollen records, and all our methods for piecing together ancient weather patterns. The revelation is eye-opening. Egypt stayed far more humid than now, up until about 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. The precise shift is still under discussion and differed across areas, but in general, North Africa underwent a slow drying out from around 10,000 BCE to 30,000 BCE. The Sahara Desert wasn't always the wasteland it is. In the depths of the last ice age, it was actually more parched than today. Yet as that icy period wrapped up, and worldwide weather systems evolved, seasonal rains from monsoons extended northward across Africa. The Sahara came alive with vegetation, rivers carved paths, lakes swelled, foraging groups thrived amid what are now empty dunes. Artwork etched into rocks from that time depicts herds of cattle, giraffes, hippopotamuses, along with depictions of angling and pursuits in verdant scenes that bear no resemblance to the modern terrain. Still, this lush phase in the Sahara proved temporary. With changes in Earth's tilt and orbit, ongoing thaw of northern glaciers, and shifts in sea flows, those monsoons pulled back southward. Lakes evaporated, rivers vanished, populations moved to the nearest reliable water, clustering near the Nile's course. And the sands crept forward, transforming fertile plains into the desolate expanse we recognize today. The key issue here is pinpointing that drying process and linking it to the Sphinx. If the monument displays clear signs of long-term rain erosion, and if major precipitation ceased around the Giza area by 3000 to 4000 BCE, then the Sphinx would have faced those rains during the moister times, implying it was sculpted prior to their end, potentially making it centuries or even millennia older than standard Egyptological timelines suggest. Schoch's findings, detailed in respected geological publications from the early 1990s, indicated the erosion effects demanded 5,000 to 10,000 years under rainy conditions. Tracing back from our era, that would situate the Sphinx's carving between 5,000 and 10,000 BCE. The earlier estimate, near 5,000 BCE, would align it with the dawn of organized societies in Egypt. But the later one, closer to 10,000 BCE, would thrust it into the final ice age, a time predating farming, ceramics, or any recorded societies in our digs. Egyptologists fired back swiftly and with fierce opposition. Detractors challenged Shah's views on several fronts. Some contended he was reading the erosion wrong, insisting that gritty winds combined with sporadic dampness could mimic those effects in far less time. Others noted the Sphinx's long history of being shrouded in dunes, shielding it from the elements, with exposure limited to short intervals during digs and restorations. If it was mostly interred, they said, the visible damage might stem from more recent, briefer rainy spells than Shah proposed. Then there were those highlighting the utter lack of artifacts from any pre-3000 BCE society equipped to craft the Sphinx. No implements, no villages, no parallel structures, no writings. If an obscure group fashioned it 10,000 or 12,000 years back, they demanded, where's proof of their existence? Where are their camps? Their additional works? How did they marshal the workforce? What drove their worldview to produce such an enormous figure? These are valid concerns, the sorts that must be resolved before embracing any bold timeline shift. Yet these ideas hinge on a key premise that warrants closer scrutiny. The notion that we'd surely have uncovered traces of such a society if it had truly existed. The belief that our current archaeological archives are thorough, precise, and extensive enough to dismiss the existence of advanced civilizations during eras we now label as pre-civilizational. Before we plunge further into this discussion, allow me to explain the dramatic transformations Earth underwent as the most recent ice age concluded. Grasping that backdrop is essential to grasping why the erosion on the Sphinx carries such weight, and why the idea of a lost civilization before the Great Floods has sparked endless fascination. The final ice age, formally termed the last glacial maximum, hit its height circa 20,000 BCE. Vast ice sheets reaching up to 2 miles in thickness blanketed Canada, large swaths of the northern United States, Scandinavia, and northern Asia. With so much water trapped in frozen form, worldwide sea levels sat roughly 400 feet below modern levels. Territories submerged today, those continental shelves turned seabeds, were back then exposed as solid ground, supporting woods, meadows, and livable expanses. The planet looked utterly transformed. Britain linked up with Europe, letting you trek from France to England without a splash. Asia joined North America through the Bering Land Bridge, even as most of Alaska and Canada hid beneath glacial cover. Indonesia, Malaysia, and vast portions of Southeast Asia merged into a sprawling continent known as Sundaland, now fragmented into archipelagos divided by shallow waters. The Persian Gulf was a parched valley fed by rivers. The Mediterranean shoreline stretched miles beyond its current reach. Whole terrains, potential hubs for early human life, now rest beneath the waves. Then, from about 15,000 BCE onward, the glaciers started thawing, not in a steady, even flow, but in erratic bursts, marked by explosive incidents that radically altered the globe's face. As warmth increased, runoff pooled against natural barriers of ice, birthing colossal glacial reservoirs. These barriers inevitably gave way, time and again in explosive fashion, unleashing torrents of water over mere days or weeks. The most thoroughly recorded of these outbursts struck North America. Lake Missoula in present-day Montana swelled to dwarf the combined sizes of Lakes Erie and Ontario, restrained by an ice barrier pressing south from Canada's sheet. Roughly 15,000 years back, that barrier crumbled. The lake's full contents, around 500 cubic miles of liquid, emptied out in as little as 48 hours. The deluge ravaged the terrain, sculpting the channeled scablands of Washington state, gouging pathways hundreds of feet into solid basalt, hurling house-sized rocks, eroding soil layers hundreds of feet deep in spots while piling them equally thick elsewhere. And this was far from isolated. Rock records indicate Lake Missoula refilled and burst spectacularly, no fewer than 40 times across millennia, as the ice wall rebuilt only to shatter anew. With each episode, deluges of biblical proportions rework the earth. This isn't conjecture, it's established geological history. The traces endure for us to observe. We can gauge the rush of waters, compute the sheer mass involved. These occurrences are proven by the enduring marks they etched into the land, plain as day even now. But Missoula was no outlier. Comparable ice-barred bodies of water dotted the frozen zones everywhere. Their breaches unleashed parallel disasters. The Baltic Ice Lake, spanning much of Scandinavia, emptied in a rush around 10,000 BCE. Lake Agassiz, outsizing all the Great Lakes together today, unleashed repeatedly from 13,000 to 8,000 BCE, pouring freshwater floods into the North Atlantic that likely threw global currents into disarray and sparked worldwide weather shifts. Nor was it solely about lakes bursting. The ice caps themselves were fragmenting amid rising heat. Runoffs slicked their undersides, and the sheer burden of stacked ice overwhelmed the glacier's ability to hold firm, causing huge slabs to calve off and plunge seaward. Known as ice sheet disintegration, this unfolds far swifter than mere thawing. When thick stretches of glacial mass, miles deep, disaggregate abruptly into the sea, levels don't creep up, they leap. 20 feet in 10 years, 40 in a lifetime. Plenty to submerge shore communities, drive mass relocations, and obliterate whole realms etched in human lore. Dig sites hint at a profound shift striking human groups near 10,800 BCE. Just as the Cold Epoch waned. For some 1,300 years, spanning about 10,800 to 9,500 BCE, heat plunged once more, not back to full glacial chill, but sharply enough. This stretch bears the name Younger Dryas, after a hardy alpine bloom whose grains surged in deposits from that era. The Younger Dryas marked a dramatic climatic downturn following ages of gradual thawing, with shrinking ice sheets and steadily better weather. Abruptly, evidence from Greenland's ice cores reveals a sharp reversal, where temperatures plunged in a matter of mere decades. For over 1,000 years, vast swaths of the Northern Hemisphere grappled with nearly Ice Age-like harshness. Then, roughly around 9,500 BCE, the mercury spiked upward once more, with this final thaw proving even more sudden than the prior chill, perhaps unfolding in only a handful of years. Debates persist on what sparked the Younger Dryas. The frontrunner explanation points to freshwater surges from the Laurentide ice sheet pouring into the North Atlantic, which stalled the Gulf Stream and set off a cascading chain of climate effects. Others suggest a comet strike or aerial explosion above North America's glacial expanse. While that's still hotly contested, the repercussions were worldwide and catastrophic regardless. And that's when the timeline turns truly captivating. Starting circa 10,800 BCE, the Younger Dryas wrapped up around 9,500 BCE. The first signs of structured monument construction, intricate social structures, and hints of what we'd call civilization pop up in the digs precisely as it concludes. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which we'll dive deep into soon, originates from about 9,500 BCE. The swift rise of farming in the Fertile Crescent kicks off near 9,000 BCE. The initial Neolithic shift from nomadic foraging bands to settled agricultural groups picks up steam across the Near East from 9,000 to 7,000 BCE. It feels like a hard reboot for humanity's progress, as though the developments predating the Younger Dryas were derailed entirely. Once the environment settled, people essentially had to reboot from scratch, piecing things back together from a diminished starting point. That's the key clue for those exploring unconventional views. They scrutinize this sequence and wonder, what if advanced cultures thrived earlier? What if shore-based communities from the Ice Age, now submerged under hundreds of feet of ocean, hosted far more refined ways of life than we acknowledge? What if those groups were shattered by the deluges, climatic upheavals, and turmoil of the Younger Dryas? What if the societies traceable after 9,500 BCE aren't ground zero but a recovery effort? And what if the Sphinx, eroded by rains in its enclosure, rains that stopped millennia prior to the pyramid's construction, stands as a relic from that lost era, an enduring testament carved in rock to a forgotten predecessor? But hold on, before we press ahead, let's clarify what _0_ really entails. This term drags along heavy assumptions, and much of the clash in ancient history debates stems from how it's framed. So when experts claim no proof of civilization predates a specific era, what precisely do they intend? Classically, it's pegged to a roster of traits: script-based communication, grand-scale building projects, bustling cities, class divisions, dedicated craftspeople, structured faith systems, and top-down governance. Under those standards, Sumer in Mesopotamia claims the title as the oldest, surfacing around 4000 BCE. Egypt trailed closely, unifying its upper and lower realms circa 3100 BCE. Additional pioneers like the Indus Valley and ancient China sprang up on their own between 3000 and 2000 BCE. Yet this framework has flaws. It elevates particular societal setups at the expense of others. It demands literacy, sidelining even advanced non-literate groups by default. It zeroes in on city hubs, dismissing nomadic or spread-out communities. Bluntly, it mirrors a slant favoring cultures resembling those of the scholars examining them. Lately, updated studies are pushing back against such strict benchmarks. We recognize now that elaborate societies can flourish sans writing, that imposing structures might arise from egalitarian groups collaborating, not enforced by servitude or rigid hierarchies, that keen insights into stars, sea voyages, and resource handling could thrive in cultures leaving faint material footprints. So, picture a group from 10,000 or 12,000 years back, mastering advanced masonry, celestial expertise, and the coordination for monumental works, but skipping writing, skipping urban sprawl, and evading the typical markers we link to civilization. Would we spot their ingenuity or dismiss them as basic foragers for failing our predefined list? This isn't mere speculation. Because in 1994, right on the heels of the uproar over the Sphinx's erosion, teams in southeastern Turkey started unearthing a location that upended our assumptions about what pre-farming peoples could achieve. The site is known as Göbekli Tepe, a name that translates to quote one in Turkish. It had caught attention earlier with its mound's peak standing out plainly, yet folks dismissed it as just a medieval graveyard, nothing worth a second glance. That changed when Klaus Schmidt, affiliated with the German Archaeological Institute, chose to dig deeper. What he uncovered defied belief. Göbekli Tepe isn't some village or home base. There's zero trace of habitation, no dwellings, no waste piles, no hints of everyday chores. Instead, it's a ritual hub, a sacred precinct, but labeling it a temple falls short of its eerie uniqueness. This place outstrips all known ancient wonders. It came before farming took hold, before pottery emerged, before animals were tamed, and it predates writing by a full 6,000 years. It edges out Stonehenge by 6,000 years too. And the Giza pyramids? They trail it by almost 7,000 years. At its core are round enclosures stretching up to 90 feet across, surrounded by hefty T-shaped limestone pillars. These were hewn straight from a quarry bedrock about half a mile off, hauled over, and set up in deliberate circular arrays. Certain pillars tip the scales at over 10 tons each. They're etched with intricate bas reliefs depicting beasts like lions, bulls, foxes, snakes, scorpions, vultures, and spiders, plus abstract motifs that could signify symbols or celestial alignments, and now and then enigmatic, abstract human forms. Carbon-14 testing yielded dates that aligned uncannily, from 9,500 to 8,500 BCE. The bottommost strata, the most elaborate and refined, align with the start of that window just post the Younger Dryas. Subsequent levels, growing simpler and less grand, push on to around 8,000 BCE, at which point the whole thing was intentionally entombed beneath heaps of rubble totaling thousands of tons for motives that remain a puzzle. Take a moment to let this sink in, how utterly bizarre it all is. Göbekli Tepe sprang from the hands of hunter-gatherers, not fledgling farmers tinkering with big builds after ages of stable communities, nor city-states with hierarchies and division of labor. We're talking nomadic foragers, the kind we figured were too busy scraping by, roaming with the seasons in tight-knit groups, lacking the coordination or expertise for such feats. And still, they've pulled it off. These stone rings demanded precise measurements, technical know-how, hauling of enormous slabs, exact positioning, advanced sculpting, and rallying workers from far and wide, plus upkeep across generations. And remarkably, this unfolded prior to any farming or herding in the area, save maybe for dogs. The ramifications hit like a thunderbolt. Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that grand-scale building, profound symbolic art, and coordinated group efforts thrived among folks before the dawn of agriculture. It upends the idea that intricate societies only arose after the Neolithic shift. This discovery tosses our familiar chronology into chaos, the one positing that crops sparked permanent settlements, which fostered complexity, eventually birthing big monuments and structured faiths. Göbekli Tepe hints the sequence might flip. Communities uniting initially for spiritual or ritual purposes, raising these landmarks, and only afterward opting for fixed lifestyles and crop cultivation to sustain the swelling crowds at these holy spots. Klaus Schmidt, who oversaw the digs until his passing in 2014, saw Göbekli Tepe as a pivotal turning point in our species' story. He envisioned it as a focal point for pilgrims, pulling in foraging clans from throughout the Fertile Crescent. The demands of provisioning and sheltering these recurring assemblies, he argued, could have spurred the rise of farming and taming beasts. In essence, faith preceded urban life and propelled its birth. Yet what truly haunts those probing beyond the mainstream is this: the site's primeval depths hold its finest work. The initial pillars stand tallest, most masterfully shaped, most accurately aligned. Builds that followed shrink in size, roughen in finish, and diminish in awe. This bucks every norm. We anticipate progress, skills sharpening with time, later works outshining their predecessors through accumulated wisdom. At Göbekli Tepe, it feels like regression, as though the builders of the first phases wielded insights or communal strength that waned by 8,500 BCE, perhaps echoing traditions from a prior era, a legacy slowly slipping away. And Göbekli Tepe stands alone no longer. Over the quarter-century since its unearthing, more than a dozen kindred locations have surfaced in southeastern Turkey and northern Syria. Each ties to that same era, echoing the core design in subtle twists. This points to a far more interconnected and advanced culture before farming took hold, far beyond what we'd ever pictured. The discovery that truly hammers this point is Karahan Tepe, uncovered in 2019 and still under excavation. Located about 25 miles from Göbekli Tepe, it belongs to that very same era. The constructions there involve partly excavating into the bedrock, revealing that these creators weren't merely shifting rocks around. They were reshaping whole hillsides, hollowing out rooms and columns straight from the stone. Such grand vision and the massive alterations to the terrain imply skills we rarely link to foraging communities. That forces us to confront some tough queries. If foragers around 9,500 BCE managed to construct Göbekli Tepe, what other feats might they have pulled off? With their advanced rockworking methods, ability to coordinate efforts, and elaborate symbols yielding those animal carvings and geometric designs, what undiscovered inventions could they have produced? And if the deepest strata at these locations display the peak of that ingenuity, did it stem from knowledge passed down from even older eras? Were they drawing on skills from prior groups that remain unidentified? Here's where orthodox scholars and fringe theorists begin clashing loudly, since conventional archaeology views Göbekli Tepe and declares, quote 2, on the flip side, unconventional explorers examine the identical clues and counter, quote 3, how does grand-scale building emerge ready-made, only to fade afterward? Why does the historical record reveal this abrupt burst of prowess, just following a major environmental disaster? Suppose these architects weren't beginning anew, but instead recovering, reconstructing, and preserving remnants of wisdom from communities shattered or wiped out amid the Younger Dryas. Each perspective scrutinizes the same rocks, yet arrives at starkly contrasting interpretations. Now, let's return to Egypt, to the Sphinx and its eroded surrounding walls. Equipped with our insights into climatic upheaval, into the untapped potential of so-called primitive groups during the early Holocene. For the controversy surrounding the Sphinx's origins doesn't unfold in a bubble. It emerges amid a swiftly shifting grasp of ancient history. Robert Schoch's geological study proposed the Sphinx might hail from 5,000 to 10,000 BCE, judging by erosion signs. The upper limit of that span would align it with Göbekli Tepe, which we've established was well within the reach of contemporaries. We've confirmed that individuals in 9,500 BCE could extract, haul, and raise multi-ton blocks. We've confirmed they could etch intricate carvings. We've confirmed they could marshal vast workforces on enormous projects sans farming, sans urban centers, sans script. Thus, the claim that nothing predated the Sphinx before dynastic times because only Egyptian society possessed the requisite coordination and tools, that claim now crumbles under scrutiny. Folks erected Göbekli Tepe in 9,500 BCE. Folks hewed enormous pillars from solid bedrock at Karahan Tepe. So why dismiss the possibility of someone in 7,000 or 8,000 BCE sculpting the Sphinx? Egyptologists often pivot in rebuttal here. Fine, perhaps it was feasible for an earlier carver to shape the Sphinx, but what supporting proof exists? Where are the matching structures from that time? Where are the villages of its makers? Where are their implements, ceramics, refuse? Where's any artifactual link to this imagined pre-pharaonic Sphinx? And that's where the puzzle deepens, because truthfully, we lack such traces. Or, put better, we haven't unearthed them so far. Compelling explanations exist for why they might elude us, even if real. Start with rising oceans and shoreline communities. In the Ice Age, waters stood 400 feet below current levels. The Mediterranean shore lay miles farther out. The Nile's mouth stretched well past its modern edge. The Red Sea spanned less area. Huge swaths of today's coastal shallows were once exposed earth, ripe for living, possibly hosting towns and civilizations. As glaciers thawed and waters climbed, those shorelines vanished beneath the waves, not in a slow creep, allowing seamless inland relocation and replication. The ascent featured sharp spikes when glacial barriers burst or dams gave way. Habitations got flooded, demolished, smothered in silt as waterways recalibrated to fresh baselines. Signs of human activity along those ancient shorelines are submerged beneath the waves today. Hidden beneath layers of silt accumulated over millennia, they're incredibly tough to locate and dig up. Underwater archaeology demands huge budgets and advanced skills. Typically, dives target modern wrecks or harbors from antiquity, skipping over those primeval seaboard areas. We've only just started mapping the flooded Ice Age shores in any organized fashion. Yet whenever we've probed, discoveries emerge. Artifacts like flint implements, shaped animal remains, and traces of camps now sitting 50 to 100 feet deep. These clues are scattered, hard to pin to exact timelines, and merely suggest the wealth that could lie hidden. Thus, the lack of traces for advanced pre-dynastic societies in Egypt could just mean that, should they have thrived, their homes were in spots we struggle to probe, coastal spots swallowed by the sea, drowned communities, interred villages. Next, consider the nature of archaeological remains and what endures through time. Massive rock structures persist. Metals rust away, but occasionally get salvaged. Ceramics break into bits that linger indefinitely. Wood, however, decomposes. Fabrics rot. Hides and twine fall apart. Papyrus flakes to nothing. All perishables disappear without ideal safeguarding. A culture relying on natural stuff for building, if their homes were timber-framed, if they wove plant strands into ropes and stripped bark for vessels, if they inscribed on fleeting surfaces or skipped writing altogether, would fade to nothing after 10,000 years, particularly in Egypt's pre-desert environment where greater moisture sped up breakdown. Later, Egyptians leaned heavily on such perishables, timber, reeds, cloth, hides, that seldom survive beyond the parched spots. They held deep expertise, from healing arts and alchemy to star mappings, handed orally or on now-vanished scrolls. So, a pre-dynastic group in Egypt, advanced but sparing on stone except for key edifices, with wisdom stored in organics or spoken word, might evade detection entirely. They'd stay unseen by diggers unless fortune smiled wildly. Finally, address identification challenges. It may seem odd, but experts sift finds via lenses of anticipated outcomes. During digs, choices abound, deeming items key, saving them, decoding murky shapes. Without anticipating clues of advanced pre-dynastic life, one might overlook them outright. History shows this. The Sphinx was sidelined by initial scholars, overshadowed by the pyramids, barely scrutinized until recently. Göbekli Tepe was spotted repeatedly over years before Klaus Schmidt grasped its import. Spots get dismissed as geology or trivial, left undug, and errors occur. Archaeology also carries era-specific slants. Ideas evolve gradually. When prevailing views dominate, clashing data gets rationalized or downplayed until undeniable. No ill intent, just how disciplines safeguard and update insight steadily, not in turmoil. Hence, hints of unforeseen pre-dynastic works in Egypt could lurk in overlooked logs or warehouses, misread or ignored, awaiting a new gaze. These points explain potential gaps in our searches so far. They don't confirm the evidence's reality. That's key. No findings aren't proof of nothing, nor guarantee of something. We can't claim non-discovery means it lurks, only that we haven't spotted it. And these factors suggest it could await revelation. Instead, examine unearthed items. Do they slot neatly into the usual timeline or spark conflicts, oddities that jar if we posit Egyptian society sprang maturer circa 3100 BCE, sans prior polish? Scrutinize and curiosities surface. Take the inventory stela, a rock carving unearthed at Giza in the 1800s, etched in the 26th dynasty about 670 BCE. It claims to transcribe an elder record recounting how Pharaoh Khufu, erector of the Great Pyramid, encountered the Sphinx as a relic, sand entombed. The stela recounts Khufu unearthing it, restoring it, erecting an adjacent shrine. Conventional Egyptologists reject the inventory stela as a fabrication from a distant era, crafted by priests of the 26th dynasty to inflate the age and significance of their temple, and their doubts are well-founded. The stela stands alone, with no corroborating records from other sources repeating its tale. The wording and phrasing clearly belong to the later time of its inscription, far removed from the era of Khufu. It resembles numerous other Egyptian writings that fabricate grand origins to enhance status. Yet, suppose a sliver of authenticity lingers within it. Imagine if those 26th dynasty priests drew from authentic ancient lore, long since vanished, that recalled the Sphinx existing well before the pyramids. Perhaps Khufu indeed encountered it in a state of great antiquity and merely undertook restorations. The stela could largely consist of mythic flourishes, yet retain echoes of a factual event. Now, consider the Sphinx's head itself. Examine it closely. Despite its erosion and harm, that head appears disproportionately tiny relative to the body. The lion's form is enormous, standing 66 feet high, yet the head is far undersized for balanced proportions. Scholars in art history and Egyptology have observed this imbalance for years. The standard account attributes it to later recarving, where the head was repeatedly reshaped and diminished over time. Certain investigators propose that the Sphinx began with a lion's head, scaled appropriately to the body, and the current human visage was hewn from that initial lion head, shrinking it considerably. Should this hold, should the Sphinx have started as a complete lion figure and received its human features only afterward? It raises intriguing puzzles about the timelines of these carving stages. Might the original lion form belong to one epoch, with the human head appended centuries later by a ruler such as Khafre, eager to affix his own likeness to a venerable existing edifice? While no conclusive evidence confirms this reshaping, intriguing hints exist. The head exhibits milder erosion compared to the body, logical if it dates to a more recent phase. Traces of tooling on the head differ from those on the body, hinting at varying eras and methods. Explaining the scale discrepancy becomes challenging if the entire monument was crafted in a single go by 4th dynasty artisans, who clearly mastered proportional accuracy in their other works. Once more, this lacks certainty. It represents an inconsistency in the data, an element that doesn't align neatly. Additional peculiarities arise. The Sphinx Temple and Valley Temple, the pair of edifices right before the Sphinx, employ core blocks of limestone extracted directly from the Sphinx enclosure. This link is undisputed, yet their design deviates from typical 4th dynasty norms. These core blocks are colossal, many tipping the scales at hundreds of tons, positioned with remarkable accuracy, but lacking the polished facing stones and ornate details common to 4th dynasty styles. To some observers, they appear archaic or rooted in an alternate building heritage. Moreover, these temples display water erosion. Their core blocks bear vertical erosion lines akin to those on the Sphinx enclosure walls. In contrast, the exterior-facing stones, unmistakably Old Kingdom in origin, reveal classic arid deterioration from wind, grit, and sand. This implies the core elements endured rain exposure for some duration prior to receiving their Old Kingdom casings, potentially indicating the cores predate that era. Erected in a damper climate before later refurbishment and completion as the region aridified, or it might reflect subtler dynamics in erosion formation, disparities in stone composition, or the order of building and uncovering. The challenge lies in weathering signatures. They offer insights but not exact chronologies. Varied limestone strata erode at uneven paces. The time of exposure hinges on periods of burial versus openness. Nearby, weather variations influence decay. Structures from disparate times might erode comparably under matching conditions, or contemporaries could degrade unevenly. This complexity fuels the ongoing heated dispute and hinders clear resolution. Geological clues point toward greater antiquity than orthodox Egyptology accepts, yet they can't pinpoint an precise age like X years. Egyptologists counter with a robust timeline supported by diverse proofs, refusing to dismantle it on vague erosion signs when viable counters exist. Each perspective holds merit inside its paradigm, and often the parties speak at cross purposes, safeguarding their stances instead of truly grappling with opposing views. Now, let's pivot to flood myths, as this is where the Sphinx debate ties into a wider phenomenon. If the Sphinx endured the massive floods marking the close of the Ice Age, if it hails from a society before such cataclysms, we'd anticipate echoes of those deluges lingering in folklore and tales. And indeed, we see them across nearly every society worldwide. The Bible's account of Noah stands out as the best known, yet it's just one among many. We've covered the Mesopotamian versions before, like those of Utnapishtim and Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, and the Sumerian Ziusudra. These narratives evidently came earlier than the biblical one, and may well have shaped it. However, tales of floods reach well past the Near East. Greek lore has Zeus unleashing a vast flood to wipe out corrupt humans. Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha are the sole survivors, alerted by the Titan Prometheus to construct a chest filled with provisions. They drift for 9 days and nights before the waters subside, coming ashore on Mount Parnassus. To repopulate, they hurl stones behind them, which turn into humans. In Hindu lore, the Matsya Purana recounts how Manu receives a warning from a fish that swells to gigantic proportions about an impending flood set to eradicate all life. Manu crafts a vessel, loading it with the 7 sages and seeds from every plant. The fish hauls the boat to a mountaintop, where Manu and the sages restore society. Chinese myth in the Gunyu legend portrays a flood ravaging the world, with the sage Gun attempting to halt it by taking divine soil that soaks up moisture. He fails and faces execution, but his son Yu prevails by carving out waterways to tame the floods, earning him the throne as emperor. Indigenous American accounts from both Americas brim with flood narratives. The Ojibwe speak of Nanabojo enduring on a log alongside animals, then recreating the world from mud retrieved by a muskrat. The Hopi describe repeated world-ending events, with remnants fleeing each disaster. The Inca kept records of immense floods that obliterated prior human eras. In Australia, indigenous stories recount seas encroaching on shores, submerging coastal regions, severing Tasmania from the continent, and flooding former lowlands and valleys. What's striking is how these accounts align with verified geological shifts in sea levels. The inundation of Bass Strait, which isolated Tasmania, happened circa 10,000 BCE. Aboriginal oral histories pinpoint this exact terrain as once dry land overtaken by water. That's a verbal legacy held for 10,000 years. Pacific Island folklore evokes submerged islands, vanished territories, and displacements driven by climbing oceans. We can link several to real geological occurrences, like land masses that loomed larger in the Ice Age, now reduced to underwater reefs and shallows that once surfaced. Thus, flood myths appear everywhere. Broadly, just two interpretations account for their pervasiveness. 1. Floods happen frequently enough that societies crafted these myths separately, drawing from their own encounters with river overflows, tidal surges, and tidal waves. 2. They stem from a collective recollection of a truly worldwide or almost worldwide disaster, a real calamity impacting vast swaths of people, whose imprint endured across ages and evolved into legend. Conventional academia leans toward the former. After all, floods mark a shared human ordeal. Settlements by rivers have faced devastating inundations. Shore dwellers have weathered tsunamis and gales. It's logical that groups would spin warning stories around floods, framing them as godly wrath or universal rebirth. Yet this view falters on certain specifics. Why do countless myths depict total global wipeouts, utter submersion, humanity on the brink of extinction? Even dire local floods don't engulf the planet. They don't threaten every person's existence. Why do so many tales highlight refugees reaching mountaintops, voyaging in vessels, biding time as waters pull back from fully swamped realms? These striking similarities span isolated cultures with zero interaction. The other view holds that these legends safeguard authentic cultural recollections of the Ice Age's finale, the dramatic sea level jumps and deluges from 15,000 to 7,000 BCE. They're not mere river tales, but records of shoreline losses, valley drownings as waters climbed, ice barrier collapses, and swift rises that could elevate seas by several feet within a lifetime. Imagine residing along the shoreline around 10,000 BCE, only to witness sea levels surging 40 feet over the span of your grandfather's life, submerging the low-lying areas where your ancestors had thrived for countless generations and compelling your group to retreat toward the interior. That kind of upheaval would undoubtedly feel like the end of the world in flood form. And should such events recur across various regions driven by the intermittent thawing of ice over millennia, diverse societies might craft parallel tales of monumental deluges, escalating waters, and desperate escapes to elevated terrain. Cognitive archaeologist Ian Davidson posits that our species possesses a remarkable capacity for retaining vital geographic details over vast timescales. In foraging communities, essential insights about terrains, freshwater supplies, wildlife habits, vegetation spots, and cyclical environmental shifts get transmitted through scores or even centuries of lineages. An event as transformative as escalating seas engulfing shoreline communities would etch itself into collective recollection, fueling discussions and weaving into narratives. As eras pass, these accounts might evolve into legends, gaining spiritual weight, yet the fundamental recollection of encroaching waters, overwhelming territories, could endure for millennia. Concrete proof supports this idea. Researchers examining prehistoric shorelines have verified that certain native Australian oral histories precisely depict topographies from over 7,000 years back. Narratives recounting straightforward land bridges to islands align with bathymetric analyses, revealing those connections during periods of reduced sea heights. This represents spoken heritage, safeguarding precise locational data across 250 to 300 ancestral lines. Thus, the inquiry arises: if Indigenous Australians managed to retain true recollections of shorelines from 10,000 years prior, why wouldn't Near Eastern groups similarly safeguard memories of the devastating inundations and climatic turmoil from that era? Couldn't those remembrances underpin the deluge legends emerging in Sumerian, Babylonian, and ultimately Hebrew scriptures? And supposing those recollections hold truth, if the deluges unfolded on the magnitude indicated by geological records, what might have vanished? Which habitations, expertise, or structures were swallowed as seas climbed 400 feet? Which communities were upended or obliterated amid the Younger Dryas climatic calamity? Enter Graham Hancock into our narrative. He's a reporter and writer, not a scholarly excavator, and that divide proves crucial for grasping his sway as well as the backlash his ideas provoke. In his 1995 volume, Fingerprints of the Gods, he contended that a sophisticated society flourished amid the Ice Age, got mostly obliterated by the upheavals marking its close, especially in the Younger Dryas, and bequeathed traces that shaped subsequent societies in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Hancock's proposition, honed through later works like Magicians of the Gods and his latest Netflix production, Ancient Apocalypse, boils down to this: a seafaring advanced culture thrived in the Ice Age, likely rooted in now submerged littoral zones. This society faced annihilation or profound setback from the disasters linked to the Younger Dryas, enormous floods, atmospheric disorder, perhaps a comet strike or aerial explosion. Its remnants dispersed globally, etched in lore as legendary benefactors, deities, or enlightening entities, hirsute sages imparting farming, building techniques, celestial knowledge, and numeracy to more rudimentary groups. Hancock maintains these refugees spurred the rise of organized societies in numerous locales, pyramid erection practices in Egypt and subsequent Mesoamerica, intricate stellar orientations at global monuments, abrupt megalithic constructions surfacing in the excavation annals across sites, omnipresent flood sagas. He proposes all these elements traced to a vanished progenitor culture, sophisticated beyond our current comprehension, decimated yet not wholly effaced, imprinting legacies on successor peoples. The established archaeological community has met Hancock's output with near-universal scorn, frequently outright antagonism. Labels like pseudo-archaeologist, peddler of pseudoscience, or peril to historical literacy have been hurled his way. Critiques have shredded his publications, and his Netflix outing prompted a petition from hundreds of specialists decrying it as perilous falsehoods. What fuels this vehemence? Multiple factors. Primarily, Hancock levels audacious assertions lacking, per expert archaeologists, the rigorous substantiation science demands. He links intriguing motifs, intriguing alignments, irregularities, and exceptions, yet he forgoes the methodical, vetted data academia insists upon. Critics often view his approach as selective, focusing on elements that support his ideas while overlooking evidence that contradicts them. Secondly, many see his theories as undermining the accomplishments of ancient societies by crediting elaborate feats to outsiders from a vanished culture instead of the local builders who truly constructed them. He's charged with stripping away autonomy and ingenuity from non-Western civilizations. After all, why assume the Egyptians couldn't have erected the pyramids on their own? Why invoke some imagined pre-flood society to account for their prowess? This perspective echoes a grim legacy in archaeology, where native populations were long robbed of recognition for their own creations due to biased assumptions. Thirdly, Hancock's concepts end up in the company of outright fringe elements and bigots. His writings sit alongside notions of extraterrestrial interventions, delusions of superior Aryan lineages from Atlantis, and various distortions of history. He doesn't endorse such views himself, yet the connection undermines his credibility among scholars. And fourth, much of the backlash stems from territorial instincts and efforts to guard professional boundaries. As an outsider without formal training in archaeology, Hancock has sold millions of copies and produced hit TV series on the subject, bypassing the ivory tower to engage audiences directly. That rubs some the wrong way. Folks who've toiled for years to gain expertise, only to watch an amateur influence the discourse in their domain. But here's the key point, and it's worth emphasizing. Getting the overarching narrative wrong doesn't invalidate every detail. Hancock likely errs in positing one grand lost society as the source of all these intriguing alignments. It's overly tidy, reductive, like hunting for a universal skeleton key to every enigma. Reality tends to be far more chaotic. Various groups evolved separately, yet devised parallel innovations for common challenges. That said, he's on to something crucial about the close of the Ice Age. Those devastating floods and shifts in climate upended early human communities. Vast chapters of our shared past have vanished, submerged beneath rising seas, and the myths handed down orally might hold real echoes of those events. He's spot on that conventional archaeology has played it too safe, lagging in appreciating the depths of ancient ingenuity, too hasty in brushing off oddities. The unearthing of Göbekli Tepe backed up a central Hancock contention that organized societies emerged earlier than believed, with grand structures predating farming, hinting at advanced developments in deep time that slipped our notice. Experts in the field never foresaw Göbekli Tepe. Thinkers on the fringes, including Hancock, had long insisted such sites must exist, and they proved correct, even if their explanations for the hows and whys miss the mark. So, the reality likely straddles the divide between establishment views and unconventional ones, as is so often the case. Not one erased superculture, but perhaps overlooked layers of intricacy. Not space visitors or mythical continents, but greater skill, insight, and potential in antiquity than traditional timelines admit. Not remnants of a worldwide elite schooling backward tribes, but isolated reservoirs of wisdom, shards of lore born by catastrophe survivors forced to rebuild from scratch. And perhaps, in a stretch, the Sphinx stands as such a remnant, a structure older than the Egypt of legend, not crafted by enigmatic Atlantean overlords, but by Nile dwellers in the lush era from 7,000 to 5,000 BCE, folks whose villages and other works elude us still, since we've searched in the wrong spots. Rising oceans and environmental upheavals erased their backdrop, and our digs weren't geared to spot them. Now, let's dive into the Younger Dryas impact theory, as it ties together the Sphinx puzzle and the larger riddle of Ice Age's finale. Back in 2007, Richard Firestone's research group dropped a provocative study claiming a comet strike or aerial explosion over North America's glaciers sparked the abrupt chill of the Younger Dryas. Their proof: tiny diamonds in soil strata from 10,800 BCE, nanodiamonds born from immense heat and force, typical of cosmic collisions. They detected spikes in iridium, that scarce metal far more prevalent in space rocks than on our planet. Magnetic microspheres appeared too, minuscule orbs of fused then cooled matter. A band of sooty deposits at that depth pointed to continent-scale blazes, and this marker showed up consistently at digs across North America and into Europe. The idea unfolded as follows. A comet, likely a piece from a bigger object that had fragmented in the inner solar system, slammed into the North American ice sheet circa 10,800 BCE. This collision, or possibly an airburst, was powerful enough to vaporize huge quantities of ice right away, unleashing vast floods of freshwater into the Atlantic Ocean. That upheaval messed with global ocean currents, kicking off the Younger Dryas Chill. The event also ignited wildfires spanning entire continents. Skies grew dim for a time, megafauna herds collapsed, and human communities faced upheaval right from the start. The Younger Dryas impact theory sparked fierce debate. Rival scientists struggled to reproduce the nanodiamond results and doubted if the supposed impact proxies were genuine or open to alternative interpretations. The evidence's spread across locations felt inconsistent. Critics pointed out the lack of a clear crater, although proponents countered that hitting the ice cap might not create a lasting scar given the melting that followed. For the next 15 years, arguments have ping-ponged. Certain investigations bolstered the idea, uncovering matching signs at locations around the globe. Counter-studies dismantled particular assertions, revealing mislabeled nanodiamonds or iridium spikes that didn't hold up statistically. Mainstream science largely stays dubious. The prevailing view pins the Younger Dryas on freshwater influxes gumming up ocean flows, without any cosmic smash involved. Yet intriguing finds have propped up the theory. Back in 2018, experts spotted a potential crater under Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier, timed to around that era. Measuring roughly 19 miles wide, it's big enough for worldwide fallout. Should it get verified and pinned precisely to 10,800 BCE, it'd be the clincher for the impact scenario. Dating efforts continue amid disputes. Some analyses peg it as far older, predating the last glacial maximum. Others back a fresher timeline. The overlying ice complicates fieldwork. Plus, even a Younger Dryas-era crater wouldn't outright confirm it sparked the cooling. After all, timing doesn't equal cause. But this ties straight into our tale. Picture the Younger Dryas ignited by such a strike, unleashing deluges, fires across lands, and a millennium of wild weather swings. That could account for so much. It might underpin those shared flood legends not as echoes of slow-rising seas, but recollections of raw disaster. It could clarify Göbekli Tepe's abrupt sophistication post-Younger Dryas, erected by refugees safeguarding wisdom to rebuild ties and placate wrathful deities. It would justify the earliest strata there being the most refined, as if hauling advanced lore from prior eras amid efforts to cling to customs after ruin. And it lends credence to pre-Younger Dryas societies. Maybe not a worldwide tech utopia, but local groups with real savvy, shattered or scattered, their insights half-saved and passed on. Graham Hancock latches onto the Younger Dryas impact as backing his grand narrative. A cataclysm like that, it's the doomsday that wiped his imagined ancient realm. Remnants scattered, hauling secrets to spots like Egypt or Mesopotamia, seeding future progress. Scholars in the establishment tread carefully, impact fans included. A hit that size would have wreaked havoc, especially for folks nearest in North America. Still, it likely spared humanity as a whole. No mass die-off. Climatic shifts hit everywhere. But the blast itself? Mostly a regional nightmare. Communities got rattled, not obliterated. Amid the squabbles, a balanced take gets overlooked. No need for one supreme global culture to see the Younger Dryas as a developmental roadblock. Envision varied local groups, pockets more advanced, thriving on submerged shores or in valleys later ravaged by floods. They might have honed skills in stars, sailing, masonry, farming, shared by word or hands-on training. Then doom hits, settlements drowned, folks displaced, old ways useless in the turmoil. Bits of that expertise fade away. Not everything was lost forever, just portions of it, at least for a while. Those who endured would reconstruct their world, though from a more humble starting point. Restoring the earlier levels of ingenuity could demand hundreds or even thousands of years. That's exactly the pattern evident in the archaeological evidence. In the wake of the Younger Dryas, there's a surge of breakthroughs. Göbekli Tepe and comparable locations, the swift rise of farming, the taming of livestock, the creation of ceramics, the establishment of fixed communities. It feels like groups that weathered a disaster were restructuring into fresher, more elaborate configurations. Perhaps they invented everything anew, or perhaps they were reconstructing, reacquiring, unearthing elements of wisdom that had faded to some degree. The Sphinx, should it truly originate before the dynastic era, aligns with this scenario. Not as a relic of some ultra-advanced vanished society, but as a leftover from a Nile Valley community during the Damper era prior to Egypt's arid transformation. A group advanced enough to sculpt grand stone figures, yet not so far along, or perhaps not inclined, to produce vast written archives or cities that we've unearthed so far. That society would have faced upheaval from North Africa's drying out, from the slow change of a verdant Sahara into wasteland, from the funneling of people to the Nile as other water supplies vanished. The Sphinx endured due to its durable rock composition, its enormous scale, its role as maybe a holy spot that subsequent groups kept honoring, even without knowing its original creators. Later, pharaohs like Khafre encountered this old lion carving, reshaped its head to resemble a ruler's visage, erected shrines nearby, wove it into their legends and rituals. The Old Kingdom Egyptians didn't construct the Sphinx, yet they embraced it, repaired it, claimed it as their own, and in the process unknowingly safeguarded it for our era, shielded it, guaranteed its endurance over 4 more millennia. This remains conjecture naturally. We lack hard proof. Still, it's a hypothesis that meshes more neatly with the known facts than the polar opposites. Superior to insisting nothing noteworthy predated 3000 BCE, or to claiming a tech-savvy Atlantean realm got completely obliterated. In the middle ground lies a tale of humanity's smarts and resilience, thriving sans urban hubs or scripts, of wisdom passed down through ages, then mislaid and revived, of enduring structures surpassing the societies behind them. Now let's tackle the critiques of the rainfall erosion theory more methodically, since this is the heart of the scholarly dispute. Robert Schoch maintains that the erosion on the Sphinx's enclosure stems from heavy precipitation, implying thousands of years of plentiful rain. Thus, the Sphinx predates 2500 BCE by a wide margin. Responses from conventional geologists and Egyptologists typically divide into a few main types. First, the entombment claim. The Sphinx spent most of its existence shrouded in sand. Records from various eras confirm it was often submerged, occasionally to its neck. It underwent digging and reburial cycles repeatedly. If covered for the bulk of the past 4,500 years, it avoided exposure to erosion that whole stretch, so the observed damage might have built up in briefer intervals of openness. Schoch rebuts that, burial notwithstanding, the visible degradation demands far lengthier exposure than the standard timeline permits. Even assuming just 25% exposure, since 2500 BCE, that yields roughly 100 years of erosion under dry conditions, not sufficient for the effects we observe. Second, the competing erosion process idea. Certain geologists suggest the damage arose from wind-driven sand paired with sporadic dampness from dew, mist, or infrequent showers. Under this view, even sparse wetness plus gritty abrasion could yield comparable effects gradually. The wavy horizontal grooves could arise from varying limestone firmness, with weaker strata dissolving more quickly. Schoch rebuts that this fails to capture the erosion's distinct traits. He contends that sand carried by wind produces alternate textures, more scraped and pocked, unlike the fluid gully-like wear on the Sphinx enclosure. Plus, he highlights fellow Old Kingdom structures at Giza lacking such erosion, indicating duration, not material traits, drives the difference. Third, the material composition claim. Limestone strata vary in density and erode unevenly. Perhaps this Sphinx was hewn from unusually tender stone that deteriorated swiftly despite the dry surroundings. Perhaps the enclosure's faces reveal strata particularly prone to any available humidity. Schoch concedes that the quality of the stone plays a role, yet he points out that other Old Kingdom buildings nearby, crafted from the same type of limestone, lack the same degree of erosion. If stone composition alone were the culprit, we'd anticipate matching erosion elsewhere, but that's not the case across the board. Next up is the theory of groundwater and capillary rise. Certain experts propose that water seeping upward from underground sources might erode the stone from the base, especially since the Sphinx resides in a depression lower than the Giza Plateau around it. This capillary effect could pull moisture through the rock, mimicking the appearance of rain-induced damage, but stemming from subterranean sources instead. Schoch counters that such underground erosion creates distinct marks, often leading to peeling and crumbling right at the soil level, not the upright grooves visible on the surrounding walls. Plus, water table levels have varied historically, complicating any precise calculation of the erosion this process might cause. Truth be told, the erosion features are intricate, shaped by a web of elements over millennia, and decoding them involves guesses about burial periods, rock durability, water presence, and more, factors we simply can't quantify for occurrences from antiquity. Experts examining identical erosion can arrive at opposing views guided by their premises and familiarity with comparable sites. That's the reason this erosion controversy lingers unresolved after 3 decades. It's not due to ignorance or deceit on either side. The clues are truly equivocal, susceptible to varied readings, and missing a clear-cut dating tool to resolve it once and for all. What could tip the scales? Straightforward analysis of the Sphinx's sculpted faces via methods such as optically stimulated luminescence or surface exposure dating. These approaches reveal when stone was last hit by sunlight or freshly hewn, though they demand extracting bits from the structure, a move that's politically and morally thorny. Egypt's officials are rightly hesitant to permit harm to such a vital treasure. Absent direct material analysis like that, we're left relying on deduction and analysis. Beyond that, there's the larger question of how scientific worldviews evolve. As Thomas Kuhn noted, breakthroughs in science rarely stem from fresh data swaying the masses to rethink everything. They unfold across generations. The established experts cling to their stances until they step aside, replaced by newcomers schooled in fresh perspectives who slowly take over. Shifts occur when inconsistencies pile up too heavily to dismiss, and the rising scholars deem prior rationales less convincing than their mentors once did. We could be witnessing this in ancient archaeology today. 2 decades back, suggesting advanced stonework predated farming would have been laughed off as fringe nonsense. Now, thanks to Göbekli Tepe, it's established reality. 3 decades ago, the notion that spoken lore could retain precise details over 10,000 years seemed absurd. Yet, through meticulous studies aligning Aboriginal Australian stories with geological data, it's been proven. The push to redating the Sphinx could mark yet another such turn, perhaps not as extreme as shock suggests, not stretching fully to 10,000 BCE, but possibly admitting that parts of the Giza layout predate the 4th dynasty, that pre-dynastic Egypt held more activity than textbooks allow, that the rise of Egyptian society around 3100 BCE didn't begin from scratch, but drew on pre-existing skills and heritage. Or perhaps the orthodox timeline will prevail in the end, with the erosion fully accounted for within standard dates. Fresh digs might uncover irrefutable proof tying the Sphinx to Khafra's era, the worker villages from the 4th dynasty, their implements, the logistics behind the build. Science thrives on likelihoods and evolving insights, not ironclad truths. It builds models that hold until better ones emerge. The conventional Egyptian timeline has served effectively for ages in making sense of the bulk of findings, which is why it dominates. But sites like Göbekli Tepe revealed our preconceptions about ancient prowess required revision. The Sphinx's erosion hints at further tweaks ahead. What's aggravating for outsiders following these clashes is how proponents on both ends tend to claim unwarranted confidence. Conventional Egyptologists often portray the standard timeline as far more fixed than it truly is, brushing off unconventional ideas as mere pseudoscience instead of grappling with the valid inquiries they bring up. On the flip side, proponents of alternative theories tend to tout their findings as ironclad, glossing over doubts and opposing viewpoints. In reality, unraveling prehistory is incredibly tough. The deeper into the past you delve, the scarcer the surviving clues become, the trickier they are to decipher, and the more guesses you must rely on. The ancients didn't leave us a tidy, straightforward archive. Instead, we're piecing together a mosaic from scattered bits, with vast gaps where key elements are lost forever. One expert might examine those same shards and envision one scene, while another sees something entirely different. What we ought to insist on is genuine intellectual integrity from everyone involved. Established scholars need to recognize the oddities, the elements that refuse to slot neatly into place, and the lingering puzzles that stay unresolved. Those exploring alternatives must admit how tentative their interpretations are, the gap between intriguing hints and solid evidence, and the weight of responsibility that comes with bold assertions. And for us in the audience, as curious observers and students, we should learn to embrace ambiguity, to juggle several potential scenarios at once, to evaluate proofs without rushing to snap judgments, and to coexist with enigmas that could outlast our own era. After all, consider the Sphinx itself. No matter if it hails from 2500 BCE, 7000 BCE, or some point in the middle, it remains awe-inspiring. It endures as a symbol of humanity's ingenuity, its profound beliefs, its drive to etch significance into the terrain. There it looms amid the sands, forever watching the dawn, forever sparking reflections on our roots, our potential, and our ties to bygone times. Perhaps one day, we'll pinpoint exactly when and by whose hands it was shaped. Perhaps we'll unearth the villages of its creators, decipher any writings they inscribed, and vividly recreate their world. Or perhaps the Sphinx will guard its enigmas, staying elusive and enigmatic, a structure that stirs far more curiosity than it settles. In any case, the ongoing dialogue matters deeply. This clash of ideas compels both archaeological and geological fields to sharpen their approaches, collect fresh data, and scrutinize their foundational premises more rigorously. Public fascination fuels resources for studies, digs, scans of submerged locations, and probes into ancient weather patterns. Even should most fringe ideas fall short, they fulfill a role by sustaining the inquiries and resisting hasty seals on the unknowns. So, as we wrap up this extended exploration spanning geology and cataclysms, legends and digs, scholarly disputes and offbeat hypotheses, what firm conclusions can we draw about the Sphinx and the chance of advanced societies thriving prior to the start of written records? Here's the solid ground we stand on. The most recent ice age concluded amid cataclysmic upheavals. Enormous deluges from collapsing ice barriers, sudden surges in ocean levels submerging shorelines, sharp shifts in weather encompassing the millennium-long turmoil of the Younger Deuce. Such occurrences were undeniable, etched into the geological record, immense in their impact. They must have reshaped human communities across the globe in profound ways. We recognize that intricate stone monument erection arose remarkably soon after the Younger Dryas at places like Göbekli, predating farming, literacy, urban centers. This demonstrates that people were capable of coordinating elaborate group endeavors and performing advanced sculpting and building far sooner than once assumed. We understand that huge swaths of Ice Age shorelines lie beneath the waves today, mostly unexplored, rendering any prior habitations or structures there nearly impossible to detect and recover. We grasp that spoken lore can retain remarkably precise details on terrains and happenings across millennia, implying that tales of floods could harbor authentic echoes of real events. We note that the Sphinx exhibits distinctive erosion features that certain geologists see as evidence of extended contact with heavy downpours, and that no such precipitation has hit the Giza area for a minimum of a few millennia. We see that this erosion debate lingers without full consensus, with specialists poring over identical data yet arriving at divergent verdicts. We observe that Egyptian society materializes in the digs circa 3100 BC, already advanced with script, structured rule, grand edifices, hinting it drew from prior customs and skills that remain partly obscure to us. We know that subsequent Egyptian writings, such as the Inventory Stellar, asserted the Sphinx outlasted the pyramids, although such statements could be mythical more than factual. That's our bedrock knowledge. So, what remains shrouded in mystery? The precise moment when the Sphinx took shape from the stone is a total enigma to us. We lack solid proof on its creators or their motivations. We're in the dark about any advanced societies that could have thrived in Egypt or beyond prior to 3100 BCE. The extent of wisdom erased by the cataclysmic shifts marking the Ice Age's close eludes us as well. It's unclear if tales of great floods echo real recollections of those upheavals or simply stem from more mundane regional deluges. The existence of a vanished civilization, be it one grand powerhouse or scattered groups with skills we've overlooked, stays unconfirmed. How vast a chunk of early human history has vanished from our grasp, thanks to erosion, concealment, or submersion under rising seas? That's another void. And just how flawed might our prevailing theories be? These gaps loom large. They ought to fuel decades of inquiry for geologists and archaeologists alike. Such enigmas are what render ancient history so captivating, perpetually poised to upend our assumptions. In my view, and take it with a grain of salt, the reality likely occupies a balanced space. I'm skeptical of some mythical Atlantis boasting cutting-edge tech that simply vanished without a trace. Traces in the rocks for something that grand would be far more evident. The absence of relics, tools, or clear-cut relics speaks volumes. Yet I suspect we've shortchanged the ingenuity of those late Ice Age and early Holocene communities. What we've uncovered so far feels like just the visible peak of a much larger mass, with further remnants from that era still buried or submerged, demanding we revise our notions of what hunter-gatherers could achieve. It's entirely reasonable to imagine refined societies in now flooded or sand-swept lands, honing expertise in masonry, celestial tracking, seafaring, and farming, insights passed down by word of mouth and shaping successors. The Sphinx could easily predate standard timelines, not quite as ancient as Shaw argues, but possibly from 4000 to 3000 BCE instead of 2500 BCE, fashion in Egypt's pre-dynastic era amid a lusher, rainier landscape, then repurposed and refined by Old Kingdom rulers to suit their legacy. Flood legends, I believe, likely hold echoes of true Ice Age-ending disasters handed through generations via storytelling until scripted millennia later in sacred writings. Those upheavals must have upended progress, wiping out seaside outposts, sparking mass relocations, and scattering or dimming hard-won lore. Still, we must guard against letting our love for the arcane spiral into baseless conjecture. Evidence must remain our anchor. We should push for meticulous scrutiny and draw firm lines between intriguing hints and verified truths. It's vital to honor the dedication of scholarly excavators who devote lifetimes to patient digs, detailed reports, and incremental advances in understanding. Humanity's saga stands as a wonder in its own right. No extras required. Consider that folks armed only with stone implements, no engines or gadgets, nonetheless sculpted the Sphinx, erected the pyramids, crossed vast waters, and charted the heavens. Such feats shine brightest when credited to everyday ancestors, wielding modest means but boundless ingenuity and grit. Each unearthed structure, each dug-up locale, each unraveled legend slots another fragment into our origins narrative. The mosaic is incomplete and may always be, but every find sharpens it, deepens it, and heightens its allure. There, the Sphinx endures in its weathered enclosure, that enigmatic smirk frozen in time, guarding its hidden truths. Perhaps it endured the Ice Age's deluges. Perhaps it beheld civilization-shattering calamities. Perhaps it's a relic from forebears absent from our digs, dwellers in a verdant Sahara under a gentler sky, with their tails, deities, and drives for hewing a colossal lion from the earth and bestowing a man's visage upon it. Or perhaps the standard timeline holds a fourth dynasty creation, extraordinary yet straightforward, awe-inspiring without defying time. Perhaps the erosion tells a simple story, soon clarified by sharper study. Perhaps no vanished realms or mythic upheavals lurk in folklore, just the gradual honing of human prowess across millennia. Regardless, the quest presses on. Fresh digs unfold even now. Advancements in underwater archaeology tools keep advancing. Techniques for dating rock faces continue to get more precise. Genetic studies are uncovering migration routes and blending of ancient groups, shedding light on how societies expanded and connected. Climate research paints increasingly vivid pictures of long-ago landscapes. Out there somewhere, maybe submerged on a continental shelf, entombed beneath layers of silt in a river basin, or overlooked in a dusty museum display, lies proof that could upend what we think we know. Another Göbekli Tepe, another breakthrough demanding we overhaul our timelines. Meanwhile, the Sphinx endures. Flood legends persist. Structures defy our timelines. Puzzles linger without simple solutions. Mystery thrives, and that's arguably the greatest gift. It fuels our search, our doubts, our humility in assuming we've cracked it all. How many dawns has the Sphinx greeted? If built around 2500 BCE, roughly 1.7 million. If from 7000 BCE, closer to 3.3 million. Regardless, it's an unimaginable stretch, a symbol of our tenacity, ingenuity, drive to etch our mark on the planet beyond single lifetimes, eras, or whole societies. The Sphinx's full story eludes us. It likely always will. Yet one truth stands. It resonates. It prompts reflections on our beginnings, our potential, what vanished, and what survived, the gap between no proof and proof of nothing. It looms as proof that history isn't buried or gone. It's alive, elusive, poised to astonish if we peer intently and probe wisely. Rest easy, assured that come morning, some archaeologist worldwide will unearth a find. A geologist will scrutinize a stone and spot fresh insights. A scholar will link dots unseen till now. The enigma of our roots builds onward, fragment by fragment, query by query, riddle by riddle. The Sphinx lingers in the sands, its face forever inscrutable, safeguarding its enigmas, primed to share its tale, if only we master the art of hearing. Deluges surged and faded, empires ascended and crumbled, wisdom accumulated, vanished, resurfaced. Amid it all, the Sphinx stood firm, steadfast, quiet. Timeless, a marker of our core essence as a people. We construct, innovate, inquire. We chase purpose. We defy oblivion. Whether 4,000, 7,000, or 10,000 years old, the figure stays constant. What endures is that our forebears, folks with dreams, dreads, and curiosities mirroring ours, fashioned a legacy that persists, a creation that echoes across eons, a marvel that still stirs awe. That's the Sphinx's true enigma, not its era or makers, but its pull on us, its significance, the endless draw to interrogate it. In those inquiries, we confront ourselves, our limits, our forfeits, our possible recoveries, our future paths. The deluges are ancient history. The Ice Age wrapped up 12,000 years back. Those who weathered the disasters, endured, and rebuilt are long gone to dust. But the rocks abide, the narratives abide, the inquiries abide, and that's sufficient, more than sufficient. It's profound. Wherever you are tuning in, Singapore under midnight skies, Oslo at dawn's edge, Mexico City in the wee hours, we're strewn across the globe, divided by vast distances, yet bound by inquisitiveness, marvel, this universal urge to trace our lineage. The Sphinx remains beneath Egypt's night sky on the Giza Plateau, clutching its secrets tight. The floods that might have forged it linger now as faint echoes in the stone, molecular hints in glacial samples, data in weather forecast, verses in forgotten tongues. But the core query lives on. What preceded? What disappeared? What revelations await? Drift off peacefully. Imagine rock and wave. Lost realms reclaimed. Forebears unnamed yet ever present in their handiwork. Their wonders resounding in ours. The Sphinx awaits at day's start, eternally vigilant at sunrise, secrets intact, as it has for millennia, and will for millennia hence. Now let's plunge further into underwater archaeology, the frontier where thrilling, world-shifting finds could lurk. At the Ice Age's close, sea levels didn't creep up modestly. They soared 400 feet over millennia, in fits and starts, not a smooth climb. That elevation happened in bursts, some slow and steady, others shockingly swift. Imagine the shoreline back in the Ice Age era. The English Channel served as a broad river valley. The North Sea formed a vast expanse of dry terrain, linking Britain to the European mainland. Folks inhabited those spaces. We've uncovered signs of it. stone implements pulled up by trawlers, animal and human remains tangled in fishing gear, bits of crafted timber. It was a full-fledged terrain, dubbed Doggerland, after the Dogger Bank fishing area, a realm that sustained human groups for millennia, only to vanish beneath the waves. Today we chart it using sonar tech, seismic profiling, and digital simulations drawn from established Ice Age shorelines. We spot the river channels, the elevations, the spots ripe for ancient camps, and we pinpoint the timing of its submersion. Doggerland's last major swamping hit around 6,200 BCE, sparked by a huge subsea slump off Norway's shore, the Storegga Slide, that unleashed a tsunami barreling through the North Sea. Whatever scraps of low ground or stubborn outposts lingered got obliterated in mere hours. This isn't guesswork. The Storegga Slide's traces in the geology are crystal clear. We trace the gouges on the ocean bottom, the scattered rubble, the wave-laid sediments along the shores of Scotland, Norway, and Denmark. And if such a disaster struck the North Sea, out in the open and well-studied, what parallel catastrophes rocked other spots? How many seaside villages got wiped out by tidal waves, by intensified gales riding higher waters, or just by the harsh reality that their forebears' long-time homeland had sunk from sight? A parallel saga played out in the Black Sea. In Ice Age times, it was a landlocked freshwater body, sealed from the Mediterranean by a natural dam at the modern Bosphorus Strait. Its water sat hundreds of feet below ocean levels. Those lake edges would have drawn settlers, clean water, rich earth, likely plenty of fish and wildlife. Then, circa 5,600 BCE, with Mediterranean seas still climbing, the overflow breached the Bosphorus threshold. It started as a seep, built to a torrent, and exploded into a devastating cascade. The salty influx surged into the Black Sea depression, hoisting the waterline by hundreds of feet over mere months or a few years. The thunder of the waters would have echoed for miles around. In level terrain, the front could have pushed forward a mile each day. Shoreline outposts stood no hope. Robert Ballard, the deep-sea explorer behind the Titanic discovery, has probed the Black Sea depths and spotted relics of old shorelines, now submerged hundreds of feet down, with traces of human activity, shaped logs, lithic tools, outlines resembling house bases. This confirms habitation on terrain that's since been abruptly and violently inundated. Certain scholars, especially William Ryan and Walter Pittman, propose that this Black Sea surge could underpin the Noah legend and various Near Eastern deluge tales. A massive inundation in the Black Sea zone, fresh in the minds of cultures that would soon invent script, might account for the echoing flood accounts in Sumerian and subsequent Hebrew writings. Survivors from those drowned Black Sea sites would have scattered, hauling their harrowing tales along. Those accounts could have evolved into the deluge epics in Gilgamesh and Genesis. The idea sparks argument. Timelines remain fuzzy. Other analyses peg the Black Sea rise as older or less abrupt than Ryan and Pittman argued. Plus, the Black Sea lies distant from Sumer or Judea, so linking them demands long-distance treks and oral traditions enduring centuries or longer. Still, it's reasonable to think one genuine regional cataclysm planted the kernel for tales that proliferated and got inscribed over time. Undisputed, though, is the flood itself. We detect it in the submerged landforms, the layered sediments, the sharp shift from fresh water to marine life in the fossil logs. The Black Sea climbed sharply and fast in the early Holocene. Dwellers along its banks would have faced it as total Armageddon, and the Black Sea's merely a single case. Shores worldwide faced the same ascent. Most hosted peoples who got uprooted, scattered, or erased. The Persian Gulf stood as a parched river gorge in the Ice Age, viable turf for habitation. Today, it's submerged, with scant digs to probe it. The Sunda Shelf off Southeast Asia fused Indonesia, Malaysia, and surrounding isles into one sprawling continent twice India's scale. That whole zone, possibly sheltering millions across ages, now lies beneath the sea. Consider the fallout. If early human societies mainly developed along shorelines, which is logical given the abundance of food sources, easy sea travel, and milder weather there, then most Ice Age communities from those times are submerged today. What we have isn't the full story of humanity's progress. Instead, we're seeing only the interior locations that luckily stayed above water, the outliers instead of the norm. The usual account of advanced cultures starting in select river basins, like those in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus, or the Yellow River, could be skewed by what managed to endure. Perhaps societies arose in numerous spots, including seaside areas, but we only hear about the landlocked ones because they weren't lost to the rising seas. Those shoreline remnants sank, carrying their proof down with them. That's why hunting for submerged ruins is so vital, and why it's barely gotten started. The tools are available these days. Advanced sonar for charting the ocean floor with precision, remote-operated vehicles to probe deep sea spots, and delicate methods for digging up relics without damage. Still, it's costly, labor-intensive, and tough to pinpoint targets across the enormous stretches of shallow seas around continents. A few intriguing discoveries have surfaced already. Along India's shoreline by Dwarka, divers have uncovered underwater edifices that enthusiasts believe might be traces of the mythical city from ancient Hindu writings. The timelines and meanings are hotly disputed, yet there's no doubt about the man-made elements, barriers or bases on terrain that's now submerged to a depth of 30 feet. Near Japan's Yonaguni Island, a sunken stone setup resembles crafted ledges and levels in a striking way. Experts fiercely argue over whether this Yonuni monument is carved by hand or just geology at play. Conventional earth scientists usually call it a product of nature, with rocks splitting naturally to mimic stairs and barriers by chance. Fringe investigators counter that the edges are too sharp, the shapes too uniform, the layout too deliberate for pure accident. I've watched the subsea videos myself, and it's tricky to decide. Certain sections seem worked by people, while others scream untouched rock. Perhaps it's a raw formation tweaked by ancient hands to amplify its stepped vibe. Or maybe it's all Mother Nature and our eyes are playing tricks. The age is murky too. It might have surfaced as late as 3,000 years back, or buried as far as 10,000 based on regional water rises or earth shifts. What stands out is that spots like Yonaguni and Dwarka spark endless puzzles more than solutions. They suggest lost human outposts on now drowned edges of land. Yet they're maddeningly vague, hard to pin down chronologically, tough to analyze, and a nightmare to explore, fully amid the hurdles of ocean ops. And these are the ones we stumbled on by luck or chasing old tales. Imagine how many others lurk uncharted, untouched, in wait. Countless Ice Age camps probably sit smothered in silt across those broad shelves. How much of our past is hidden beneath the waves? That's the root of alternative thinkers' irritation with established digs. They eye the huge, unprobed zones, the hurdles of tech and funding for seabed hunts, the skimpy push toward probing lost coasts, and they charge, "You're not truly searching. You're brushing off the idea of ancient shore-based societies, even as you skip the legwork to uncover them. It's not that you've scoured and come up empty. It's that the search hasn't happened." Traditional excavators fire back that budgets are tight. You can't comb every inch, and it takes a solid hunch to justify dumping fortunes into sea surveys and digs. They note that most subsea hauls turn out lackluster or unclear, the useful stuff drowned in junk, and the solid proofs of old camps are mostly from after the big floods, not primeval Ice Age holdouts. Each camp makes sense. In reality, we require deeper dives into ocean archaeology, broader sweeps of old shorelines, bigger funding for gear, and skills to spot and salvage those buried spots right. And it has to be driven by solid science, rigorous steps, expert checks, not hunches or dreams. At the same time, we need creativity too, openness to the idea that the picture's incomplete, that our views on civilization's birth might reflect survivors more than the real spread. The lack of findings from submerged locations doesn't prove there's nothing to discover down there. It could simply indicate we haven't searched thoroughly enough so far. Now, let's delve deeper into global flood legends, since their abundance and striking similarities are truly astonishing. We mentioned a few before, but examining them more closely reveals parallels that are eerily precise. In Mesopotamia, various accounts of the deluge appear repeatedly. The Sumerian Eridu Genesis from around 2300 BCE recounts how the deities grew annoyed by mankind's clamor and resolved to wipe out humanity via a great flood. The god Enki alerts a man named Ziusudra to construct a vessel. When the deluge arrives, it rages for 7 days. Afterward, Ziusudra offers sacrifices as the waters subside, earning immortality from the gods. The Akkadian Atrahasis epic, dated to about 1800 BCE, offers a comparable tale with added insights into the divine motives, overcrowding and racket, as well as Atrahasis's escape and the events that follow. Then comes the flood narrative in the Epic of Gilgamesh, arguably the best-known rendition, where Gilgamesh encounters Utnapishtim, the deluge's survivor blessed with everlasting life. Utnapishtim shares his experience, the divine caution, the ark measuring 7 days in length and as broad as it was tall, gathering his kin and beasts aboard, the tempest enduring 6 days and 7 nights, dispatching birds to scout for terra firma, and performing a rite once the craft settles on a peak. The connections to the biblical account of Noah are unmistakable, noted ever since the 19th century when these cuneiform tablets were deciphered. The framework matches almost exactly. Variations are mostly in the religious elements, one deity against a pantheon, yet the core sequence remains consistent. The alert, the ark, exact measurements, the animals, a storm of defined length, a mountain touchdown, avian scouts, and the offering. The conventional view holds that the Hebrew tale drew from prior Mesopotamian lore, likely during the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BCE, as Jewish scholars encountered Babylonian customs firsthand. That seems plausible. The Israelite flood narrative is later and displays evident literary ties to its Mesopotamian predecessors. Yet this merely shifts the inquiry. What inspired the Mesopotamians? Our oldest recorded iteration is the Sumerian one circa 2300 BCE. However, those writings assert they're recounting far more ancient happenings, and the vivid particulars, the vessel, the birds, the summit, imply the tale stems from genuine recollection, not pure fabrication. Did a genuine disaster flood ravage Mesopotamia? Planting the kernel for this myth, digs reveal that Mesopotamian settlements endured recurrent ruinous inundations. The area is flood vulnerable. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are erratic, and multiple excavations uncover flood deposits in their stratigraphic layers. Still, no such regional overflow would have felt like an apocalypse to those who lived through it. They'd realize folks in adjacent areas or upstream towns were unscathed. Thus, for the legend to reflect a true event, it demands a deluge vast enough to make witnesses believe the entire planet was submerging. This might stem from a colossal outburst flood, akin to the Missoula outbursts in North America. Picture a glacial lake in northern Mesopotamia's highlands breaching its barrier, unleashing a towering surge along the Tigris or Euphrates, obliterating all below, leveling settlements, inundating territories, and leaving those who endured utterly persuaded their world had perished. An ordeal like that would linger in collective memory across millennia. Alternatively, it might link to rising seas and the inundation of the Persian Gulf. In the Ice Age, the Gulf was a parched expanse, a waterway basin. As oceans climbed, it slowly submerged. Should a natural dam give way abruptly, allowing the waters to pour in swiftly, it could spell doom for valley dwellers. This occurred quite early, likely 12,000 to 8,000 BCE, so the narrative would require oral transmission for thousands of years prior to inscription. That's an extensive span, but oral histories can retain details over such periods as we've seen, so it's feasible. Beyond Mesopotamia, the Greek deluge myth features Deucalion and Pyrrha enduring a flood unleashed by Zeus. Notably, this is among the rare tales that pinpoint the trigger: human depravity, particularly the offenses of Lycaon's offspring. The outline echoes Near Eastern counterparts. A divine hint from Prometheus, crafting a chest that drifts 9 days, alighting on Mount Parnassus, the sacrifice, and humanity's renewal, though the elements are Hellenized, infused with Greek flavor. Did the Greeks adapt this from Near Eastern origins? Very likely. We recognize substantial interactions between ancient Greece and the Near East, involving commerce, settlement, and shared cultural influences. Yet Greece itself boasts a legacy of devastating deluges thanks to its earthquake-prone terrain that's vulnerable to tidal waves. Thus, the Greek legend of the Great Flood could blend imported aspects with genuine origins tied to regional calamities. In Indian lore, the Matsya Purana recounts how Manu, humanity's progenitor, rescues a tiny fish that seeks his care. He transfers it from a vase to a lake, then a stream, as it expands enormously. Eventually, the creature discloses its identity as Vishnu's incarnation and alerts Manu to an impending deluge. Manu constructs a vessel, loading it with the 7 wise men and specimens of every vegetation. When the waters rise, the fish hauls the craft to a mountaintop. Once the flood subsides, Manu conducts ceremonies and weds a female figure emerging from his oblations, from whose union humankind arises. This narrative stems from a wholly distinct heritage compared to Near Eastern tales. The specifics diverge sharply. The Piscine god stands out as exceptional. The emphasis on ceremonies and offerings bears a clear Hindu imprint. Still, the core framework echoes familiar patterns: a divine alert, a vessel, inundation, a summit refuge, and renewal of life. Direct transmission from India to Mesopotamia seems improbable, despite ancient commerce paths, though not entirely out of the question. It's more plausible that such accounts evolved separately, sparked by comparable environmental upheavals or societal imperatives. Over in China, the saga of Gun and Yu describes a colossal inundation endangering civilization. Gun, a godlike or heroic figure, attempts to tame it by pilfering enchanted earth capable of swallowing endless moisture. His efforts flop, leading to his death sentence. But his offspring, Yu, prevails through ingenuity, carving waterways to redirect the flow instead of blocking it outright. Yu rises to mythic ruler status, hailed as the originator of the Xia dynasty. Here, the emphasis shifts from mere endurance to mastery, governing waterways via construction over simply drifting in a craft. This variation mirrors China's enduring battle with river taming, erecting barriers and conduits to subdue elemental powers. Nevertheless, the motif of apocalypse-level flooding persists. Across the Americas, deluge legends abound. The Ojibwe describe Nanabojo enduring on a platform with beasts, remaking the globe from sediment retrieved from the depths. Hopi accounts speak of successive planetary annihilations, with the virtuous fleeing each to rebirth existence. Inca traditions hold that Viracocha purged the world via flood, sparing just a pair to restore the population. These emerged in total seclusion from Eurasian counterparts. The continents were settled by migrants from Asia, likely 15,000 years ago or more, well prior to any script's invention, so American flood stories crystallized on their own, untouched by Mesopotamian or other ancient influences. Yet they recur in diverse forms with recognizable traits. What accounts for this phenomenon? One perspective holds that inundations are routine, that farming communities everywhere endure seasonal river overflows, prompting folks to envision extreme versions, a total wipeout, and invent survival yarns. From this angle, such myths sprout autonomously across the globe, rooted in the shared ordeal of floods and the innate drive to fabricate lore. The counterargument posits that these tales safeguard genuine recollections of the Ice Age's terminal cataclysms. Global populations witness shorelines vanishing, waterways bursting as glacial barriers collapsed, megawaves from subsea collapses, and the turbulent shifts of the Younger Dryas. These horrors etch so deeply that they endured through spoken heritage for millennia until scribes or contemporary researchers documented them. Reality may blend the two. Certain flood narratives likely echo regional woes, fluvial surges, seismic waves, tempest swells hitting particular locales. Others could retain echoes of broader glacial deluges, particularly those detailing vast oceanic rises. And a few are likely fanciful inventions devised to clarify origins or the cosmos's nature, employing floods as a potent plot tool since they're relatable and terrifying. What's striking is the recurrence of key features: a supernatural caution, a seaworthy arc or float, near total human extinction, anchoring atop a peak or elevation, dispatching fowl or creatures to scout for terra firma, post-rescue rites or tributes, and Earth's restocking. These threads weave through legend upon legend, society after society. Either this points to an astonishing coincidence where numerous societies separately arrived at identical story frameworks, or it hints at a collective recollection, a genuine occurrence or chain of events that impacted vast swaths of humankind, with the memory enduring and passing down despite evolving cultural nuances and additions. We'll probably never pin it down definitively. Legends are frustratingly vague by nature. They've been molded over millennia of oral transmission, with untold narrators tweaking elements and shifting societal backdrops influencing them. Pulling factual history from folklore feels like piecing together a pristine manuscript from a pile of flawed duplicates. It's doable, yet unreliable, demanding meticulous effort and forever tentative. At the very least, we can assert that deluge legends are authentic. They're ubiquitous across the globe. They exhibit striking parallels, and even if nothing more, they capture shared human encounters with inundations alongside common methods of weaving those into tales. Do they also echo particular past disasters like cataclysms marking the Ice Age's close? That's a captivating puzzle still unsolved. Shifting gears, let's explore a few other venerable locations that could be far more ancient than standard timelines allow. The Sphinx isn't the sole edifice stirring up debates on revised chronologies. Among the most intriguing is Egypt's Valley Temple at Giza, positioned adjacent to the Sphinx. Constructed from enormous limestone slabs, some totaling hundreds of tons, it's executed with remarkable accuracy. Inside, it once boasted huge granite columns and granite veneers. The design approach stands out. Employing what's known as cyclopean masonry, it joins hefty, uneven stones seamlessly sans mortar. This diverges sharply from standard Old Kingdom Egyptian building, which favored smaller, uniform pieces. Such cyclopean work appears in far earlier Mediterranean edifices, from Bronze Age spots to Neolithic ones in areas like Malta and Greece. The Valley Temple's foundational limestone masses display erosion akin to that in the Sphinx's surrounding walls. By contrast, the subsequent granite overlay, unmistakably Old Kingdom from its aesthetics and etchings, bears classic arid erosion. This implies a staged build, an earlier base later clad and refined in the 4th dynasty. Should that base predate the 4th dynasty by how long? It's anyone's guess, perhaps just a couple of centuries, harking to Egypt's pre-dynastic era, or vastly more ancient. Maybe aligning with a primordial Sphinx if Shok's timeline holds. The Osirion poses yet another riddle. Linked underground to Seti I's temple from the 13th century BCE New Kingdom era, the Osirion itself employs an utterly distinct building method from Seti's. Fashioned from colossal granite slabs, some up to 100 tons, it's arrayed in a severe, unadorned minimalism. No carvings, no writings, merely immense rocks shaping a chamber half flooded. It bears no resemblance to New Kingdom norms. It evokes Old Kingdom vibes or predates that. Certain scholars propose it outstrips Seti's temple by centuries or even thousands of years, with Seti merely erecting his shrine beside and atop a pre-existing holy site. Orthodox Egyptologists reject this, claiming the Osirian matches Seti's time frame, but adopts an outdated motif deliberately, maybe for ritual purposes. Who's correct? Lacking superior chronology tools, it's tough to judge. Stone monuments are infamously tricky to timestamp. Radiocarbon won't touch rock. You might assay plaster or plant remnants nearby, but those indicate mortar production or deposit dates, not when the stones were hewn or set. Relying on aesthetics creates a loop. You peg age to presumed style evolution, assuming steady forward march, which falters if builders chose retro looks on purpose. Megaliths scattered across the Mediterranean spark comparable doubts. Malta's temples, particularly Gantija, hail from around 3600 BCE, predating the pyramids and ranking among the planet's eldest independent stone builds. Hewn from hefty limestone chunks, some exceeding 20 tons, they sport intricate bas-relief art and celestial orientations. These Maltese marvels demonstrate that Stone Age folks, lacking metals, wheels, or scripts, could marshal workers to extract, haul, and align ton-plus boulders into complex edifices. This flies in the face of traditional views on what Neolithic societies could accomplish. If folks in Neolithic Malta managed such feats back in 3600 BCE, just imagine the potential of Stone Age communities elsewhere. What structures did they erect that we've yet to uncover or have misdated entirely? Take Newgrange, for instance, which hails from around 3200 BCE, predating both Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids. This enormous stone complex features a passage tomb, crafted so that the winter solstice sun penetrates its inner chamber. Achieving that level of alignment demands advanced insights into solar cycles and the skill to incorporate them into exacting design work. Stonehenge, meanwhile, evolved over several building stages beginning circa 3000 BCE, though the location might have held spiritual significance far earlier. Fresh digs have uncovered traces of timber constructions and ceremonial practices stretching back to 8500 BCE, coinciding with the close of the Ice Age. Thus, the iconic stone ring standing there now represents merely the final chapter in a saga of reverence spanning millennia. Collectively, these locations reveal that grand-scale building, expert celestial tracking, and intricate societal structures emerged far sooner and across broader areas than 20th century archaeologists ever imagined. With each passing decade, we revise timelines for key human innovations, script, farming, metalworking, epic edifices, shifting them earlier thanks to fresh discoveries and refined chronologies. Such findings don't confirm a vanished high-tech society, yet they do highlight our persistent underappreciation of prehistoric ingenuity, the oversimplification in our straight-line progress narratives, and humanity's enduring knack for extraordinary feats despite basic tools. This prompts a deeper inquiry. As we repeatedly learn that eras stretch back further and that early humans outpaced our expectations in complexity, when do we begin to entertain the notion of overlooking a grander puzzle? When does the buildup of oddities, ill-fitting sites, timeline disputes, baffling advanced methods form a clear trend demanding fresh scrutiny? Orthodox archaeologists insist we're handling it well, slotting each find into current frameworks. Göbekli Tepe shocked everyone at first, but it's now seen as proof that foragers raised monuments prior to settled farming. The Maltese shrines are impressive, sure, but they're chalked up to Neolithic prowess. Newgrange demonstrates early stellar savvy. Every element slots in somehow. On the flip side, fringe thinkers argue those slots require awkward adjustments, pointing to an overarching story, perhaps overlooked background, or exchanges of expertise that standard theories ignore. They propose not one obliterated superpower, but several refined societies during the waning Ice Age and dawning Holocene, whose legacies shape civilizations across various lands in ways we haven't fully grasped. The argument rages on, likely for years to come. How to settle it? Gather more evidence through digs, comprehensive underwater explorations, superior chronometric tools, collaborative efforts linking geologists, climate experts, geneticists, and excavators. Ditch the silos, foster real dialogue between establishment and outsider voices, each respecting the other's data instead of brushing it off, and spark wider curiosity to secure research bucks. Public fascination with these riddles, from blockbuster docs on ancient enigmas to chart-topping tomes on forgotten worlds, pressures officials and organizations to invest in probing deep human pasts. Though the hyped tales often miss the mark, the buzz they create sparks genuine breakthroughs. So, circling back to the Sphinx amid this tour of geology, weather shifts, deluge legends, submerged realms, timeline clashes, and offbeat ideas, we've examined Göbekli Tepe and Newgrange, the Black Sea and Doggerland, the Younger Dryas and Ice Age finale. What's the takeaway? The Sphinx endures as an enigma. Robert Schoch's erosion studies imply it might predate standard Egyptian timelines by a lot, perhaps from a wetter epoch between 5,000 and 10,000 BCE. Proof remains elusive, but it's far from implausible. The erosion signatures truly diverge from typical Old Kingdom relics. Conventional geological counters hold water, yet they don't fully convince. Suppose the Sphinx dates back further, it likely emerged in Egypt's pre-dynastic era, or even sooner, amid the African humid phase when the Sahara bloomed green and rains fell abundantly. Those who shaped it were most likely local inhabitants of the Nile Valley, not refugees from a lost Atlantis, but communities whose advanced skills we've yet to fully appreciate, since so many of their villages and structures have vanished or remain undiscovered. They possessed hands-on expertise in masonry, workforce coordination, celestial observations, and timekeeping systems. Such wisdom passed down verbally and via hands-on training. As the climate shifted, turning the Sahara arid and drawing crowds to the Nile's banks, this legacy endured, ultimately fueling the rise of pharaonic Egypt. The Old Kingdom rulers, stumbling upon this relic from antiquity, likely reshaped its head to echo Khafre or some other king, erected shrines nearby, and wove it into their sacred worldview. They might not have grasped its true origins, or perhaps echoes of old tales about primordial rulers and deities lingered in their lore. Those echoes evolved into the mythic chronicles etched in artifacts like the inventory stela. All this remains conjecture, of course, a plausible narrative that aligns with certain clues. Competing narratives match other fragments of data just as well. Truthfully, certainty eludes us. We spot intriguing trends, baffling irregularities, compelling links tying the Sphinx's erosion to the Ice Age's close, the dawn of grand edifices worldwide, and tales of great deluges. These threads could signify deep truths, or mere chance alignments, or causes we haven't yet imagined. What we must avoid is asserting absolutes amid the ambiguity. Established scholars shouldn't brush off these oddities as fringe nonsense without scrutinizing the data. Fringe thinkers, too, ought to avoid treating their theories as settled truth. Everyone involved needs to embrace humility before the unknown, persist in collecting fresh proof, and adapt their perspectives as discoveries unfold. As everyday enthusiasts, we should savor the enigma, celebrate how human history brims with unsolved riddles, embrace the thrill of untapped wonders, and recognize that antiquity guards hidden depths, while nurturing curiosity, questioning both conventional and unconventional assertions, and welcoming whatever evidence arises. The Sphinx endures there, serene and timeless, guarding its enigmas with effortless grace. It has outlasted dynasties and faiths, conflicts and upheavals, the ascent and collapse of myriad human pursuits. It has witnessed the shift from lush rains to barren dust, the Nile's endless cycles of swell and ebb, the desert's embrace and erosion over countless ages. Be it 4,500 years old, 9,000, or an age in between, it stands as enduring proof of our species' ingenuity, our quest for the divine, our drive to forge symbols of purpose and etch our fleeting existence into the world's fabric, defying the grave. It binds us to forebears unknown, underscoring that folks much like ourselves, grappling with similar dreams, dreads, and wonders, gazed upon stars and dunes, and resolved to craft a legacy that defies time. In the final tally, that's the essence, not pinning down exact timelines or settling scholarly rivalries between orthodox and unconventional views, but forging that timeless bond, acknowledging our place in a saga stretching beyond our spans, inheriting legacies from myriad eras past, and etching our own traces that could intrigue those far in the future. Good night. As we wrap up, a quick dive into the techniques for aging ancient sites seems fitting, since grasping their mechanics and flaws is key to unpacking these discussions. Experts in archaeology and geology debate ages using varied approaches, each with unique merits and pitfalls, and occasionally contradictory outcomes. Radiocarbon analysis stands out as the best-known technique. It gauges the breakdown of carbon-14, a radioactive variant taken in by organisms during life, which then diminishes at a predictable pace post-mortem. Assessing the leftover carbon-14 in remnants like bones, timber, ash, or vegetation lets you estimate the time since death. Its strength lies in solid accuracy. often pinpointing within decades for modern finds, though slightly broader for ancient ones. Drawbacks include its reliance on organic samples and a cap around 50,000 years, beyond which traces fade too much for precision. Thus, it's ideal for chronologizing timber frames or organics embedded in limestone deposits from epochs millions of years back. Trying to use radiocarbon dating on limestone won't reveal anything about when it was shaped or cut, only the era when the rock itself formed. In some cases, though, you might apply it to nearby organic remnants linked to a stone structure. Think charcoal remnants from a campfire at the build site, timber used for ramps or supports, or bits of organic stuff mixed into the binding agent. But this comes with risks. You're relying on the idea that such material matches the time of building exactly, that it wasn't added much later, and that it truly pins down the right time frame. Those guesses could hold up, or they might fall flat. Thermoluminescence and optically stimulated luminescence, on the other hand, gauge the last time specific substances faced intense heat or direct light. These approaches target minerals like quartz and feldspar, which trap energy from ambient radiation. Firing clay in a kiln or letting minerals bask in sunlight wipes that energy slate clean. From there, radiation slowly replenishes the stores. Gauging the buildup lets you figure out when the vessel was baked or the mineral last saw daylight. For stone carvings, this could theoretically timestamp the moment a fresh-cut face emerged into the open air, which would transform how we time icons like the Sphinx. Yet these tools are still evolving. They lack the sharp accuracy of radiocarbon, and applying them means extracting bits from the artifact, sparking debates over politics and preservation. Egypt understandably hesitates to permit drills into the Sphinx for test samples. Cosmogenic nuclide dating tracks the buildup of rare isotopes generated when cosmic rays strike exposed rock. The more time a face has seen the open sky, the higher the concentration of these nuclides. In principle, this could clock how long a sculpted surface has been out in the elements. Still, it demands sampling, costs a bundle, and demands tricky analysis to factor in any epochs when the rock was covered up. Plus, the margins of error tend to be broad. Stylistic analysis lines up a monument's artistic or building traits against others with firmer timelines. If the Sphinx echoes sculptures from the 4th dynasty, it likely hails from that era. Archaeologists and art experts lean on this a lot, and it serves reliably in times with solid sequencing. The catch? It's often self-reinforcing and presumes styles evolve in a straight, foreseeable path. But suppose a structure intentionally borrows from older motifs. Or imagine the Sphinx's head got reworked several times, swapping out prior forms. What if overlapping cultures muddled distinct artistic lineages? This approach offers value but falls short of certainty, particularly for enigmas like the Sphinx, where the whole timeline hangs in doubt. Stratigraphy examines the buildup of earth and rubble, encasing or capping structures. The principle of superposition holds that lower strata predate those above. By timing layers sandwiching a find, you can narrow its origin window. It shines for refuse heaps or sites with neat stacked deposits. Around the Sphinx, though, repeated digs and refills across millennia have scrambled everything. The sequence no longer reads straightforwardly. 4th dynasty ceramics turn up in spots by the Sphinx, signaling human busyness then, but that doesn't pinpoint the carving date. It only shows folks were dropping shards close by. Records from history and carved dedications might supply clues if they reference the site directly. The inventory. Stella insists the Sphinx predated Khufu, yet experts brush it off as a later myth-tinged account, unworthy of historical weight. Some carvings tie it to Khafre, but nothing flatly declares he commissioned the cut. They could merely honor his upkeep or link to a pre-existing wonder. The snag with textual evidence. Ancient writings blend fable and fact, inflate tales, and occasionally twist truths for power plays or faith. Swallowing them whole is foolhardy, but ignoring them risks discarding real echoes buried in the myths. The key is sifting them shrewdly, hunting core truths amid the flourishes. In the end, we've got this arsenal of techniques, each with its upsides and pitfalls. For the Sphinx, not one delivers a slam-dunk verdict. Radiocarbon skips the stone outright. Thermoluminescence holds promise but remains untried. The site's layers are a mess. Style comparisons loop back on themselves. Texts clash and confuse. So, we're stuck relying on geological erosion studies, which point to a much older origin, clashing with the archaeological backdrop that ties it to the 4th dynasty. No one can clinch the argument definitively right now. That's what keeps the controversy alive. That's what makes both views still viable. And that's exactly why we require improved techniques, additional digs, more thorough investigations, and perhaps even a readiness to apply targeted destructive testing that might yield straightforward dating results. Now, let's dive into what we truly understand about pre-dynastic Egypt, since this background is essential for assessing if an advanced society could have thrived prior to 3100 BCE and sculpted the Sphinx. The standard story claims Egypt leaped from dispersed Neolithic hamlets to a single kingdom in a flash, yet the truth is far more nuanced. During Egypt's Neolithic era, spanning about 6000 to 3900 BCE, farming slowly took root in the Nile Valley. Folks cultivated wheat and barley, tended herds of cattle, sheep, and goats, and dwelled in stable or somewhat transient communities. The weather was damper back then. Parts of the Sahara remained livable, and the Nile's yearly inundation underpinned their farming triumphs. Around 4000 BCE, more refined societies began to surface. The Narda culture, identified from a location in Upper Egypt, reveals signs of social divisions, expert artisanship, and exchanges over great distances. Narda ceramics stand out for their elegance, adorned with intricate patterns. Tombs from Narda display growing disparities in riches and rank, hinting at emerging social ladders. The Narda era breaks into stages. Narda I from 4000 to 3500 BCE features community-scale setups. Narda II, 3500 to 3200 BCE, brings bigger communities, fancier graves, and stronger proof of far-flung commerce, even with Mesopotamia. Narda III, 3200 to 3100 BCE, marks a swift push toward a centralized state, leading to the First Dynasty circa 3100 BCE. Thus, the traditional timeline highlights a steady rise in complexity during pre-dynastic Egypt. It wasn't as if basic villagers just up and erected the pyramids overnight. There was a clear progression. Still, those exploring alternatives scrutinize this progression and wonder if it's the full picture. Might there have been prior stages we've overlooked? Could the advanced skills seen in early dynastic structures demand even deeper roots? A fascinating spot is Nablier, situated in the desert west of the Nile, roughly 500 kilometers south of Cairo. From about 7000 to 5000 BCE, seasonal ponds drew herders here. These folks constructed stone features like circles that seem oriented toward celestial events. The level of these orientations sparks discussion, but certain scholars claim they demonstrate an understanding of sky patterns that echoed later in Egyptian beliefs and buildings. Suppose the herders at Napa possessed advanced star tracking skills by 6000 BCE, and suppose links persisted between them and subsequent Nile dwellers. That expertise might have endured, shaping the cosmic orientations in Egypt's later edifices. This doesn't confirm specifics about the Sphinx, but it illustrates that refined expertise prevailed in the area sooner than typically thought. The core issue is if such abilities, stargazing, masonry, group structures, could have supported grand constructions pre-First Dynasty. Findings from Quebec demonstrate that hunter-gatherers managed enormous stone edifices. Insights from Napa indicate pre-dynastic North Africans grasped astronomy. Data from Larda reveal escalating societal layers across the 4th millennium BCE. Combine them, and you get a credible setting for an ancient Sphinx. No need for a vanished super-civilization, just acknowledging that Nile Valley inhabitants from 6000 to 4000 BCE may have been sharper than history credits. They could have raised monuments that succeeding dynasties refined and repurposed, or shared insights fueling the explosive bloom of Egyptian society at the dynasty's start. The challenge lies in our spotty archaeological grasp of that time. Egyptian digs have mostly zeroed in on dynastic hotspots, pyramids, shrines, burial sites with clear artifacts and writings. Pre-dynastic locales are tougher to spot, less flashy, and draw scant resources or interest. The villages dotting the Nile from 6000 to 3000 BCE are likely entombed beneath subsequent layers, modern urban sprawl, or farmland tilled for millennia. We could be overlooking significant pieces of the puzzle just because we haven't searched the appropriate spots or because subsequent developments have erased the traces. This doesn't confirm an earlier origin for the Sphinx, yet it indicates that a lack of proof doesn't settle the matter. Much remains unclear about pre-dynastic Egypt, and exploring those gaps could reveal unexpected insights. Genetic research brings further depth to this narrative. Examinations of ancient DNA from Egyptian mummies and bones reveal a steady lineage in the Nile Valley stretching back at least 6,000 years. The pyramid builders were heirs to the Neolithic farmers who initially populated the region. No sudden influx of newcomers displaced them to spark civilization. Instead, this points to the skills and customs that shaped dynastic Egyptian society evolving right there over extended time rather than arriving from distant lands. Should the Sphinx predate the 4th dynasty, its creators would still have been the forebears of dynastic Egyptians, native Nile Valley inhabitants, not some enigmatic lost civilization. Critics often charge alternative thinkers with undermining local ingenuity, implying that ancient Egyptians or other early societies required intervention from Atlanteans, extraterrestrials, or external influences to accomplish their feats. That's a valid point against certain fringe ideas, especially the wilder ones, but it doesn't pertain to debating the Sphinx's timeline. Proposing it as 7,000 years old rather than 4,500 doesn't invoke Atlantis. It simply acknowledges that Nile Valley residents 7,000 years ago possessed the intelligence and skills of humans everywhere, and under suitable conditions and drives, they were equipped to sculpt a bedrock monument. Comparable achievements occurred in other regions during that era, so why dismiss the possibility in Egypt? Opposition to such notions appears rooted more in scholarly inertia than solid facts. The established view holds that civilization arose around 3100 BCE, so any hint of advanced endeavors prior to that disrupts the framework and faces doubt. But frameworks are approximations, not absolutes. They serve until better ones emerge, and they ought to evolve when new data demands it. Consider what upcoming finds might reveal. How could we settle debates over the Sphinx's antiquity and the prospect of earlier societies? Start with expanded underwater digs. If advanced shoreline communities thrived in the Ice Age, their relics now lie submerged. Targeted scans of those ancient shorelines are essential, focusing on appealing spots like estuaries, river deltas, protected coves, and zones blending freshwater with ocean, offering varied food sources. The tools are ready. Advanced sonar for detailed seabed mapping, remote-operated vehicles for probing deep sites, and advancing subsea digging methods. The real hurdles are securing budgets, gaining governmental backing, and fostering ties among ocean archaeologists and nations overseeing these submerged zones. Next, intensified digs in arid zones that were lush in the past. Think the Sahara, Arabian Peninsula, India's Thar Desert, and Central Asian expanses. These areas supported life during moister eras, with potential sites now hidden beneath dunes awaiting discovery. Remote sensing via satellites and ground-penetrating radar can pinpoint candidates, but follow-up demands fieldwork crews and the meticulous process of unearthing and analyzing. Then, refined dating tools. We're after techniques to age stone carvings directly, sidestepping the need for big samples with narrower margins of error. We require ways to tell fresh work from later alterations. Progress is happening, though it's not yet practical for key sites like the Sphinx. Additionally, greater cross-field collaboration. Geologists should team up more with archaeologists. Climatologists can refine timelines for settlements. Geneticists track migrations and blends. Experts in folklore assess if legends encode real history. These issues demand multifaceted approaches beyond one field scope. Finally, fairer dialogue between conventional and unconventional scholars. The rivalry must end. Established experts should tackle oddities and critiques head-on, avoiding blanket labels of pseudoscience. Fringe investigators ought to sharpen their methods, clearly separate guesses from data, and adapt ideas when proof falls short. The aim ought to be pursuing truth above all, rather than scoring points in disputes. It ought to focus on grasping history with the utmost precision, rather than clinging to stances or safeguarding territories. Science thrives when it's transparent, when data flows openly, when clashes of ideas are handled with civility, and when core assumptions remain flexible enough to adapt as needed. What might truly groundbreaking findings entail? Picture underwater explorers uncovering undeniable signs of advanced rock formations along today's drowned Ice Age shores, edifices, memorials, ports clearly man-made and firmly dated prior to 10,000 BCE. That scenario would demand a complete overhaul of our grasp on early human timelines. Or suppose a dependable technique emerges for dating the engraved faces of the Sphinx and similar relics directly, yielding ages far beyond the standard timeline, not relying on erosion analysis, but on precise material testing. Such results would end the controversy once and for all, or envision digs at pre-dynastic Egyptian locations unearthing memorials, intricate tools, and indicators of skills and expertise that clash with accepted stories. Or if DNA research uncovers surprising genetic blends or migrations pointing to far richer backstories than we now recognize, such breakthroughs remain possible. Untapped archaeological sites abound worldwide. Advancements in tech keep accelerating. Annually, fresh methods and approaches to probing antiquity arise. The upcoming major revelation could stem from an innovative subsea exploration, a serendipitous desert dig, a leap in chronological tools, or an overlooked detail in archived field notes that escaped earlier experts. Of course, the established timeline could hold firm. Fresh data might irrefutably confirm the Sphinx's origin in the 4th dynasty. Erosion features could be adequately accounted for via deeper insights into how limestone degrades in fluctuating weather. The puzzles might dissolve without necessitating drastic shifts in our historical framework. In any case, progress would ensue. We'd gain deeper insights regardless. We'd sharpen our view of humanity's story either way. The ambiguity feels uneasy, yet it's invigorating too. It signals ongoing potential for revelations, lingering enigmas to unravel, and enduring queries that keep ancient times dynamic and engaging, not a closed-off relic. Let me share my prediction on how posterity will view this contentious period. They'll recognize that orthodox and fringe scholars alike hit the mark in spots while erring elsewhere. The establishment correctly insisted that upending proven timelines demands ironclad facts, that bold assertions need robust validation, and that scrutiny, collegial critique, and methodical precision are essential. Yet they could be overly cautious at times, hasty in brushing off oddities, and overly attached to frameworks ripe for refinement. The contrarian voices rightly highlighted voids in traditional accounts, the underestimated ingenuity of early societies, and the likely profound impacts of Ice Age-ending upheavals on communities. However, they frequently exaggerated claims, mistook hints for hard facts, and erected grand constructs on unstable bases. As ever, reality likely occupies a middle ground. The Sphinx could indeed predate official estimates, though unlikely as ancient as the wildest guesses. More advanced pre-dynastic groups may well have existed, but not some worldwide pinnacle like Atlantis. Rising oceans and climatic disasters doubtless upended populations and wiped out seaside outposts, yet they probably didn't obliterate every vestige of elevated cultures. What unfolds before us live is the mechanism of scientific evolution. It progresses unevenly amid friction, missteps, and impasses, but steadily toward enhanced comprehension. Successive eras wield superior instruments, amassed information, and polished models. Each era mends prior flaws while introducing its own, awaiting later fixes. The Sphinx endures, surpassing our arguments, our convictions, our doubts. It has already survived the ancient Egyptians, Roman dominion, Islamic expansions, Napoleon's campaigns, and every theory imposed upon it. Ours will fade in time as well. Perhaps therein lies the true insight. Not the exact age, be it 4,500, 7,000, or 10,000 years, but that enduring human creations outlive their makers' worlds. They persist in communicating across immense temporal divides, even as original intents fade from memory. And they keep sparking awe, inquiry, scholarship, and discourse across the ages. The Sphinx stands as a testament to humanity's drive, our urge to forge significance, our longing to etch our mark upon the world in ways that outlive our fleeting existences. No matter its true origins, its creators, or its initial symbolism, it embodies all those elements today. It captures the enigma of history, the boundaries of what we know, the chance that deeper truths await us. So, keep its veil of intrigue intact. Allow the arguments to rage on. Press ahead with the investigations. Welcome fresh findings that challenge long-held assumptions. Encourage conventional and unconventional scholars to challenge one another, fostering sharper methods, deeper analysis, and more precise scrutiny of clues. Sustain the public's intrigue as it fuels resources and focus, paving the way for tomorrow's explorers to unravel what eludes us now. The Sphinx possesses eternity. It's unhurried. It will linger until we crack its code or until we abandon the puzzle for fresh riddles. In any case, it endures there, weathered yet resilient, enigmatic yet awe-inspiring, a rocky emblem of an innate human essence that defies our grasp for total comprehension. Perhaps that's sufficient. Perhaps it's the truest we can express. We hold data, we hold hypotheses, we hold disputes, we hold doubts, we hold an extraordinary relic that raises inquiries beyond our current resolution. We hold a narrative still unfolding, revelations pending, insights pending, and we hold the darkness, the sands, and the ceaseless dawn that the Sphinx has witnessed through countless cycles. The identical light that dawned on Ice Age foragers, on Stone Age cultivators, on early settlers before the dynasties, on those who raised the pyramids, on visitors from Rome, on learned minds from the Arab world, on today's excavators, on every one of us striving to reconstruct our origins. Rest easy, assured that come morning, someone out there will be probing these enigmas, examining these traces, pondering these prospects. The pursuit of clarity persists. The unknowns persist, and the Sphinx observes, steadfast and timeless, guardian of truths it might withhold forever. Sleep soundly. Wherever you dwell in this shared expanse, a realm that's cradled our kind for millennia, vast stretches of which still baffle us. A restful night to bygone eras and eras ahead, to all the breakthroughs on the horizon. A restful night to the Sphinx and every enduring relic that survives its makers. A restful night to the inquiries that spark our wonder and the secrets that temper our pride. The rocks will greet the dawn, the inquiries will linger, the hope of solutions will linger, and that suffices. That's all there is. Sleep well. Peace.